The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with over 20 years on the flight line. Yeah, I can actually say that now. Pretty cool. Welcome aboard Flight 132 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on the 19th of April, 2023. From the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's flight, I am very grateful to be joined by some excellent co-hosts, Rob and Terry. Together, we will discuss our latest flight schedules, and we also have some audio that Alex has sent in about what he's been up to. And I'll share an event that I was able to take part in that involved some very special Make-A-Wish families. We will discuss all that and more, but not before we welcome a very special guest that I have bribed handsomely to be on today's show. He is my favorite Acme Airlines captain and a veteran of the U.S. Air Force. His airline career has spanned over 3 decades, where he has flown the Boeing 727, the L-1011, the MD-88-90, and he currently commands the Boeing 717 aircraft. He is an alumni of Georgia Tech and Auburn University, and a graduate of an accident investigation and safety school at the University of Southern California, Norton Air Force Base. He is an avid vocalist and the host and creator of a wildly popular aviation podcast that will surely give you a syndrome. So buckle up. This is going to be epic. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the podcast. Well, joining us today is superb aviator and Squawk Ident podcast co-host. He is a former international professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an A&P and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, commercial drone operator, and currently an Airbus pilot for Legacy Airlines, the name we use here on the show as an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. Joining us from his home podcast studio, where he's taking a break from Airbus upgrade training. From somewhere in Flower Mound, Texas, help us in welcoming our very own Captain Rob. Rob, how you doing?
Hey, Tony, it's good to be back, man. It's been I missed quite a few shows lately, and when you asked me to be on this podcast, I was like, well, I'm actually going to be off that day, so here I am. I'm in upgrade training on the Airbus, and just trying to what's the word? What's the statement we use? Cooperate and graduate. So
Very
just
much.
relearning how to fly the Airbus from the left seat.
Yeah.
It's been pretty good and a great learning event.
Yeah. And you have a kind of a pass, I would say, from not being on many of the shows lately, because that is a very, very big deal. I mean, you've done it before. You've done upgrade training all those years ago over at Sandpiper, the alias to our one of our wholly owned airlines. But it's always exciting, and I've got to ask you now. You've done it before. You're no stranger. You're upgrading on the same equipment. Is it as nerve-wracking as it was the first time?
No, I wouldn't say it's nerve-wracking. I think the biggest challenge for me at this point right now is just putting that captain cap back on. And, just making sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's like you've done before. But just, it's 5 or 6 years of just a little bit less of a threat being in the right seat. I mean, you obviously have to, be as attentive as a captain needs to be. But now it's just, a little more pressure just to make sure you're wearing that captain's cap for Legacy Airlines the way they want you to do it. And, it's just basically greasing the wheels back up and getting in there and doing what you've done before, relying on the experiences and the training that you've had before. So it's going pretty well. Just got to do it the way they want you to do it.
Yeah. And is drinking from the fire hose still an accurate description of what training is like, or is it a little bit settled down now that you've been with the company so long?
As you'll find out soon, since you've been on the airplane, everything's the same. There's no difference. It feels like I'm in a long recurrent. There's really no pressure. Like everything they talk about, and you already know. It's just really just putting it, back to use. Regurgitating the information when it's required, and really the triggers of the flows are new on the captain's side, and you've seen them do it time and time again from the right seat. Now you're actually doing it in the left seat, and just making your right hand do what your left hand has been doing the whole time is basically the exercise. So
and that's what I was going to ask you. Is that a big change? I mean, most of us are not ambidextrous, and I think in a normal aircraft, let's just call, I don't know if I should say normal. If in a Boeing aircraft or an aircraft that has a control yoke like an Embraer or anything like that, you grab the yoke with one hand or the other, depending on which side of the aircraft you're sitting on. But when it comes to a side stick that we're dealing with the Airbus product, have you had any simulator time yet that you've been able to change it up?
Yeah, we've been in the simulator twice so far, and we've done some pretty good maneuvers in there. You get accustomed to the side stick really easily, and of course, the Airbus is such a really easy airplane to fly with a side stick. With auto trim and everything. So you really just forget about like the harder parts of flying with trimming, and you bank the plane and you let it go and it stays in that bank. Or you pitch for a certain degree pitch and you let go and it stays there. So you don't have to fight that stuff. But just seriously, the real challenge is you'll find yourself the first day or two, sitting in the left seat, but using your left hand to program the FMS. So your left hand to reach over, and flip a switch. And I'm like, this right hand is doing nothing over here. It's closer to everything. So, that's just a mental block that you'll easily get over, but it's something that you're going to find yourself doing. And it's just a matter of repetition.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to hearing more about your training process and success in the upcoming shows. So thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be back.
Well, also joining us today is a superb aviator and another Squawk Ident podcast co-host. He's a retired U.S. Army colonel and a former Black Hawk Battalion commander. His journey has led him to operate Apaches, Black Hawk C-12s, UC-35s, and he has a master's degree in management and strategic studies. He's a former Embraer 145 pilot and currently a Boeing 737 pilot for Transglobal. The name we use here on the show is an alias to his employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. Joining us from his mobile sound studios on the 11th floor of the Marriott Marquis in San Francisco, California. Help us in welcoming our very own Terry S. Terry, how you doing?
Doing good, man. How are you? How's everything going with all of you? I just landed here in San Francisco.
Yeah, busy, and I'm happy that you're in my, I guess you could say my hometown. I grew up there. And you're at the Marquis, Marriott Marquis. That's fancy.
The Marquis, yeah. This hotel, I've been here once before, and it's nice. It's close to all the cool stuff in downtown San Francisco. So just a short walk over to Union Square, and lots of cool stuff. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, we just landed here, I don't know, about 2.5 hours ago, and just trying to get settled in.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your ability to go run around San Francisco and dodge homeless bombs. Anybody that is in the Bay Area knows what I'm talking about. And thank you for being here. We're so excited. You're 6 months in from your transition. We've talked about that on the previous show. How has everything been transitioning for you?
It's been going well. I actually just had a training event at the training center and completed that successfully. No issues there. So back on the line, started this trip this morning, first day of a 4-day. We finish up with a red eye on Saturday. And my wife so lovingly scheduled family pictures Saturday afternoon. So I'm going to be bleary-eyed for family pictures. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, nothing a Red Bull won't cure.
That's right. Red Bull for the red eye.
Red Bull and frozen spoons under your eyes to get the the evidence of red eyes after. But thank you so much for being here. Your journey over at the Transglobal has been very interesting. I'm very proud to say that the co-host here on the show now represent about 80% of the mainline legacy carriers out there. I had to find somebody from Acme to come on the show so we can balance it all out, right? And I think today would be a perfect day to try that out. But first, let's hear from Alex. He sent in some audio feedback because he and Captain Roger could not make it today, but Alex wanted to just send us some audio so we can catch up with what he's been up to. And here's what he sent in.
Hey, Aviator Tony and the rest of the Squawk Ident crew. It's Alex out on the road in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, in the middle of a sequence. I can't attend this recording because I'm actually in the middle of some flying right now. But I miss you guys, and I can't wait to see you guys again and start recording. So latest news from me is I've been busy working pretty much a solid schedule of Sunday to Wednesdays, which I don't know how I managed to do that, with some weekends off, which again, I don't know how I managed to do that. Been pretty busy in between my trip sequences as I've been in the process of looking for and buying a house out in Texas. So that's pretty exciting for me. Got that going there. We close on the 27th this month. And I also became a pilot mentor with our union, the Airline Pilots Association. So that's another interesting thing going for me. Hope all is well with everybody. Miss you guys. And back to you in the studio.
Well, thank you, Alex, for sending that in. Do hope that you have a very good trip, and we will catch up with you on the very next show. The great thing about this podcast is that we have a very good variety of pilots from many different carriers, but we only have spoken with a few from Acme. Speaking of Acme, I mentioned in the opener that we had a very special guest today, and I'm just so very excited to have an aviation podcasting celebrity join us today. And if some of you out there are wondering how the heck did I manage to pull this off, money. Lots and lots of money. No, I'm kidding. I just asked. His successful aviation podcast has been on the air for over a decade and is followed around the world. Together with his co-hosts, Captain Nick, Dr. Steph, Captain Rick, and Macho Nick Camacho, and his producer, Liz Piper, he has produced over 565 weekly episodes in which they describe the view from their side of the cockpit door. By doing so, they have infected millions with their highly contagious APG syndrome. Joining us today to share his journey in aviation and podcasting is the one and only Captain Jeff Nielsen.
WAPG, it's the airline pilot guy.
Captain, how you doing?
Hello.
Oh my gosh.
I'm just you said I was a vocalist, so I thought that didn't sound very good. Oh well. Hi. Great to be here.
That sounded
and
fantastic.
Wait a minute, just before we continue, you were kidding about the money? I thought that was okay.
No, that is being forwarded as we speak.
No, it's great to be here.
Yeah, the check is in the mail. It's made out of rubber, but hey. Well, oh my God, so happy to have you on the show. We've kind of been going back and forth. We've known each other now through emails and feedback and whatnot. I'm a big fan, as we all are here on the show. So it's kind of a big deal. It's podcasting and aviation celebrity in my eyes. Your show has really inspired so many people out there that are just in love with aviation, or they're interested in aviation, or they've been in aviation and retired and just get to be a part of it. And it's an international sensation. I love that some of your listeners are from all over, from Iraq, from New Zealand, from Australia, from England. I mean, you name it. And it's very inspiring to hear that feedback, that constant feedback that you're getting. And you've done so much for the community. This small community of podcasting has really been opened up by your show. And I just want to say thank you.
Wow. Okay. I really appreciate the very nice things that you just said there. But yeah, it's been quite a ride for me doing this podcasting thing, and I'm loving it. Still loving it.
Good. And I expect, we both listen to another podcast that is produced by what we in the industry call the Podfather. And they're always looking for like the end game, the end strategy, the way out.
The exit strategy.
The exit strategy, yes. And so please confirm it right here, right now, that you do not have any kind of exit strategy in the near future.
Now, that was not on the list of approved questions that you were allowed to ask me, Tony. No, just kidding. He did not give me a list. No, I mean, I will be retiring at the end of this year, and I do not plan on retiring the podcast thing. So, no, I keep plan on continuing this thing for as long as people will listen, and probably longer. Even if people stop listening, I'll probably still do it. I'll pretend that I'm actually recording stuff. I'll be, like 85 years old and, disconnected from civilization, but still, like holding a spoon and talking into it. Probably.
There you go. So here on Squawk Ident, the whole thing started because I wanted to highlight the journey of today's aviator. Because it's amazing, after a couple decades that I've been at least out on the flight line, you learn so much about the person sitting next to you when you're up there at 37,000 feet, cruising along at 500-600 miles an hour. And you find out stuff that, people like to pigeonhole pilots into we're a particular like Ken doll of a person. We're very logical. We're very intelligent. We're very calm under pressure. And, we read our newspaper and drink our coffee and we push the takeoff and cruise and land buttons. And it's very difficult. But there's so much more. And there's so much of a variety of personalities out there on the flight line. A very common question I often ask the people I interview is, how do you deal with conflicting personalities? And we may get to that a little bit later in the show. But what this industry, if you just sit back and ask a couple questions and you listen, you find out that we have some really amazing people out there out on the flight line. And your journey in aviation, did it start kind of at a very young age like most, or did it kind of happen later on throughout your adolescence?
Yeah, I wasn't one of the ones that show up to officer training school or ROTC or whatever, and like, okay, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. Do you like airplanes? Yeah, I guess. No, that was not me. But we all know probably people are like that.
Yeah. Who
are like that. And nothing wrong with that. I mean, some of the best pilots I've flown with were in that category. People that just kind of said they were talking to the recruiter if they went into the military and, didn't really know what they wanted to do. I, on the other hand, consider myself very blessed that I knew from a very young age that I wanted to fly airplanes. Growing up in Southern California, a lot of airplanes in Southern California.
Oh, yeah.
Looking up, above and, hearing and seeing the airplanes go by, and I'm thinking that would be cool. I would love to do that someday. And we, lived not too far from Los Angeles International, and close enough that was the big airport that we were near, and we would go to take family and friends and pick them up. And I don't know. I think maybe you all share this same kind of excitement or whatever you want to call it. But when I smelled the jet fuel, the burnt jet fuel,
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
That to me was intoxicating. I just absolutely, I don't know how to describe it, but that smell. And I think you guys know what I mean.
Oh,
it's just like, oh man, that's just like incense or something. It's just wonderful. And then seeing the pilots walking, down the concourses with their suitcases at that time, holding them, one in, suitcase in the right arm and the flight kit in the left. There weren't roller bags back then. And thought, man, they must be flying to some exotic places. And I would love to do that for a living. So yeah, I got bit by a very young age. I was back in my house making little tiny paper airplanes or little model die-cast airplanes and, flying them around, pretending I was actually in the airplane. And anyway, all that kind of stupid stuff. But
so you didn't come from an aviation family then? Or?
No. My dad did work in the aerospace industry, but he was not a pilot. But so I was around aviation indirectly, I guess. But my dad didn't really talk too much about that. But he worked at North American and then North American Rockwell in Southern California. He early on was part of the whole project, the Valkyrie XB-70 program. And then when he left the aerospace industry, he was working for working on the Saturn V booster project at North American Rockwell. We lived close to Seal Beach in Los Alamitos. Oh, yeah. And so at Seal Beach is where they had the big assembly building for the Saturn V. And so, I was kind of around it a little bit, but that was more, the space aspect of things. And I was still more in the world of, flying airplanes and, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And now at the age of 13, the family got up and moved to Mobile, Alabama. Was that part of your dad's job that transposed you over there?
So a lot of people say, well, how did he end up going from, why did you move from Southern California to Mobile, Alabama? I mean, I thought your dad was in the aerospace industry. Well, there's a company down in Pascagoula, Mississippi, that makes ships for the Navy. And he was hired to be a project manager for the Iranian destroyer program. That was when the Shah of Iran was still in power. And they ordered, I think, 4 Spruance-class destroyers. And so that was part like a subset of all the other destroyers that Ingalls Shipbuilding was building. They were also making some helicopter assault carriers, like little mini carriers. They call them landing helicopter assault LHAs at the time. I think now they call them LHDs or something. So Mobile was kind of the closest biggish city or bigger city to Pascagoula. I mean, he went down there and looked around and, thought that Mobile would be a better place to have the family. But anyway, the reason why he was hired by a shipbuilding company was that they were transitioning from building ships from the keel up, the traditional way of building ships, to a modular fashion. So, they wanted to hire a lot of people from the aerospace industry to come in because they were used to dealing with projects like timelines and schedules and budgets and that kind of thing for that kind of construction. And so, that's how he ended up, switching from aerospace to shipbuilding back in the 70s. Yeah. So
now, were you in an area? It sounds like you had some military presence. Were you in an area where there's still a lot of aircraft around?
You mean in Mobile?
Yeah, like when you were growing up, going to school, were you still able to look up like we do here in Southern California and see airplanes everywhere?
Well, not as, obviously not as much as Southern California, because I think, if you look at all the areas in the country, I mean, that's where it's mostly concentrated. But not as much. But I still had the bug, and that didn't keep me from dreaming about being a pilot. Yeah. But anyway, I also a big part of my life. My mom and dad were both musicians, piano players, organists, choir directors in church, and that kind of thing. And so, from a very young age, I was in that kind of world as well. And then I started playing an instrument before I left California, and then continued to do that when I was in Mobile. And so, music was a big part of my life. I was a trumpet player and a piano player, but I kind of started shifting more toward playing the trumpet. And that became a big part of my life. In fact, it almost became a couple times my primary focus as far as what I want to do for a living. Oh, wow. But what I learned as you grow older, you start realizing that everything isn't free, and mom and dad have to pay for, electricity and mortgage and, life. And I started doing the math, and if I stay in music, which I think it would be very fulfilling, but I'd probably be a band director. And as I said, it'd be a very fulfilling career, but I wouldn't make a heck of a lot of money. And I probably wouldn't be able to land a studio musician job as a trumpet player, because that's, you have to be very, very talented and know the right people, and timing's everything. And I thought, I'll be a band director, and I will not be able to afford to take flying lessons or have my own airplane or whatever, because it's just going to be too expensive. Yeah. I thought, on the other hand, if I became an airline pilot, I realized at some point, for many, many years, I didn't realize that airline pilots get, especially for major airlines, get paid pretty well. And that wasn't even a calculus for me. It was like, I just want to fly airplanes. And then, of course, as you grow older and you realize the practicality of life, you need to start thinking about that kind of thing. And I think if I could be an airline pilot, I could still sing or play trumpet or do music on the side if I wanted to. So that's kind of what got me back on track to doing the lifestyle of an airline pilot.
And how old were you when you started coming to these realizations? Were you still a teen or a little older? Yeah,
I was a teen. When I was in high school, really, really focused on music because it just it came easy to me, and I was heavily involved in a lot of jazz bands and concert bands, marching bands, that kind of thing. It was a big, huge part of my life. Yeah, I'd say probably in my high school years. And as I got closer to that point where I was going to graduate from high school and go off to college, again, at this time, this is in the 70s, mid 70s, and I realized that the people that were getting hired by the major airlines mostly were military trained pilots. And I didn't come from a military family at all. My dad was in the Air Force for 4 years or something like during the Korean conflict, but I think it was in Germany. He wasn't anywhere near the war, and he didn't come from a military family either. And I just didn't know anything about the military. And I really thought, I don't really want to be in the military, because I thought the only thing I knew about it was that you live in barracks and you eat in mess halls and all the stuff that you see on TV and movies and stuff. Yeah. And of course, which is not anything close to real. I knew nothing about the fact that, you're an officer in the military. It's not quite the same as, living in the barracks and eating in mess hall. Although there are times when that is a true thing. But most of the time, it's kind of like having a regular job and going to the office and flying your airplane and sometimes having to go places where people shoot at you, But that was the realization I came to a little bit later. But as I'm going off to college, I'm thinking, nope, I don't want to go into the military to get my experience to fly for the airline. So I'll be, I don't know, some kind of an engineer. I've heard that engineers, make decent money, and a lot of my dad and his peers were telling me that's what you need to do: get an engineering degree and then get a degree like a master's in business administration or something like that. So I thought, okay, I guess that's what I should do. So I went off to Georgia Tech my freshman year, and I thought I was really smart in high school. I was the outstanding senior in mathematics in my graduating class of 550 people. And so I go off to Georgia Tech thinking I'm, God's gift to science and mathematics. And then I quickly realized, even before my first day of class, taking some of these tests for, pre-orientation or whatever they call it, that I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. Wow. I was in the bottom 25% of my freshman class as far as all these test scores are concerned. I went, oh my gosh, wow, there are a bunch of geniuses around here. I'm a dunce. And so I didn't start off on a good footing when I started at Georgia Tech. It was a struggle. I really struggled with a lot of chemistry and calculus and everything else. I don't know what I'm doing here, but I convinced my parents. Were paying out of state tuition to Georgia Tech, and that was a lot of money for them. And I felt really bad because I love my parents and I want them to be proud of me. And I was just barely making passing grades in my courses, and they're spending all this money on me. And I said, why don't we do this? Why don't we transfer? Why don't I transfer over to Auburn University, another good engineering school? And that's in-state tuition. You guys can save a lot of money. And I was very fortunate that my parents were able to pay for my education. I didn't have to. I just had to, go have jobs to get spending money and that kind of thing. And so then I switched to electrical engineering at Auburn. And again, that was a struggle, even as much as the struggle at Georgia Tech. And I kept thinking to myself, I can't picture myself doing this for a living. I want to be a pilot. I want to be an airline pilot. And darn it, if it means that I got to go into the military to get my experience, and that's what I'm going to do. And so I switched to aviation management, which at the time at Auburn University was kind of under the umbrella of the School of Engineering. It was kind of an engineering light. So the engineering courses that I did take were not too bad, not too hard, and a little bit of business administration and that kind of stuff, and some aviation courses, which I just loved because I just, ate, drank, slept aviation. And so my grades, went up immediately, and I was on the dean's list for every quarter after that. And I was just in heaven, studying things that I love. And so while a lot of the people that were also in aviation management at Auburn University, I didn't do the professional flight option, by the way, because again, that was too expensive. My parents couldn't afford it. And I started to look at the ROTC program because a lot of the people that were in the aviation management program at Auburn were also in the ROTC program. But those guys, again, this was in the late 70s, and the guys that had pilot slots for ROTC kept getting, they'd get them yanked away and then give them back and yanked away. And I'm thinking, well, I don't want to do the next couple of years in ROTC and find that I don't have a pilot slot. I don't want to go into the Air Force if I can't be a pilot. And so I started doing my own research and found that, it looks like the military services are going to need a lot of pilots right about the time that I'm going to be graduating in 81. And I thought, okay, with that in mind, I think I'm going to go visit the recruiter in Opelika, which is, Auburn, Opelika, they're like sister cities. And I said, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to apply for officer training school. I want to be a pilot. And he said, okay, go back to Auburn, go to the ROTC department, take all these tests, the AFOQTs. And I did that. And he goes, okay, we'll see how you do. Mm-hmm. And so I got a call from the recruiter, I don't know, a few weeks later. And he said, hey, I got your results. You did really well. You did really well on the navigator portion of the thing. So I'm thinking I'll submit your application to officer training school as a pilot or navigator candidate. And nobody had warned me that recruiters might do this kind of trick because they have, the certain amount of slots that they have to fill. Mm-hmm. And I thought, something just didn't. He goes, no, if you're a navigator, it's really easy to switch from navigator to pilot.
Okay.
Well,
yeah, I know
you guys know what I mean. Yeah, it's not easy. And I thought, no, just submit the thing as a pilot candidate. And if they turn me down, then we'll, see what to do after that. Yeah. And so that's the way we submitted it. He called back, a certain amount of time later and said, hey, congrats, you're accepted as a pilot candidate in the Air Force. I went, great. So I graduated from Auburn University aviation management degree. And 2 weeks after I graduated, I was on a bus to Montgomery, Alabama, Maxwell Air Force Base. I was, swearing in, thinking, what am I doing? And then on an airplane to San Antonio. At the time, officer training school was at the Medina Annex of Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. Beautiful town. I love San Antonio. And because I didn't have a private license, I only had a few hours in my logbook of I worked at Mobile Air Center, part-time and in the summertime. And I was a lineman or a line boy. I think they call us line boys back then. And one of the fellow line boys was also a CFI, and so he'd take me up every once in a while in a 150, and I'd get to log the time in my logbook, but it wasn't really formal training at all. So I think I had less than 5 hours in my logbook when I went off to officer training school as a candidate, a pilot candidate. And because of that, because I didn't have a private certificate, they said, well, you need to go through this program called FishPot. I went, huh? Everything is acronyms, as everything is in aviation and many other jobs. Flight Screening Program Officer Trainee. So it's a flight screening program they have set up for the officer trainees who are pilot candidates. And so that first 3 weeks, I think-ish, we got to wear flight suits and They'd load us up in a school bus and drive us from San Antonio to Hondo, Texas, which out in the middle of nowhere. And I guess it was an old World War II base or Army Air Corps base or something. I don't know. They had a little undergraduate pilot training program set up, a civilian company that would simulate what it would be like to be in the undergraduate pilot training in the real Air Force. And I guess they want to make sure that they're not going to spend all this money on you and find that you can't fly an airplane.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So they did, stand up, emergency procedures. And you go out to the T-41, which was basically a souped up Cessna 172. And you go out there and, do patterns and other air work. And then they'd solo you. And I think I ended up, soloing with about, 12 hours or something. I'm not sure. I have to look at my logbook, but it was pretty, pretty quick, concentrated, fast program. And then once you soloed, basically, obviously you have the eye-hand coordination necessary to, be in undergraduate pilot training. So then you move into, now we're going to teach you how to be an officer for the next 90 days. That's what they call us 90-day wonders. And, got out of there, commissioned as a second lieutenant. And then, I don't know, I had maybe a month break or something. It was pretty quick. Right after that, I went right into UPT in the Air Force at Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi and started my Air Force flying career. Yeah. And about a year later, graduated. And I was thinking that I was going to be coming back as an instructor pilot, and because that's what everybody was telling me. And then right before assignment night, my student squadron commander met with me between the squadrons and said, "What do you want to fly? When what do you want for an assignment?" I said, "Well, I'm going to come back as a instructor, T-37 instructor." And he goes, "No, what would you really like to fly if you could?" I said, "The C-141." So I'm thinking that in order to get hired by the airlines, obviously you got to have heavy time. Well, it's not obvious, but helps. That seemed obvious to me. Yeah. But I thought that was the only thing the only way you could do it. Came to learn after the fact that no, you don't. I mean, there are a lot of people that are flying for the major airlines that have never flown a heavy. They're fighter guys or whatever. So anyway, I'm still thinking I got to fly the heavies and I got to fly the transports because that's the kind of time that they want. In the airlines. And so I told him C-141. He goes, "Yeah, that's what I want to do too." He said, "I'll see you out there in about a year." And I went, "Excuse me?" And he goes, dismissed, go back to stand up or whatever. Well, okay. So I ended up being very consistent through my pilot training days and ended up as a distinguished graduate. So that means that if there was the airplane that you want available, then you could have it. Oh, and okay. So I left there as a C-141 Starlifter pilot. And so I did that for a couple of years, and then I thought when I looked at the Columbus Air Force Base Air Training Command in my rearview mirror that I would never, ever see an Air Training Command base again in my life. I was very wrong because about 2 years on station at Travis Air Force Base in California, got a letter that said, "Oh, you're being considered to come back to the Air Training Command to be an instructor pilot." And I went, "No, no." I don't want to do that. And again, I'm still kind of thinking that's going to ruin my plans because I need to have all this heavy time. But again, I'm not still clued in yet that I don't need heavy time to get hired by a Delta, United, American, any of the big carriers. Yeah. So I went, and actually it was a silver lining because my wife is from Atlanta, or my former wife. And her father had been diagnosed with cancer, and we were on the West Coast, and her dad's still here in the Atlanta area, and so Columbus got us not quite to Atlanta, but a lot closer. It was within driving distance, so she got a chance to visit with her father a lot his last year of life. So that worked out well for her and for us. And so I did my about 4 years pilot training instructor, and then got hired by Acme at the end of 1988.
So now here's a question I like to ask. A lot of former military pilots out there, and the transition phase. Both Rob and Terry have dealt with this, transitioning from a phase of military service into a civilian aviation profession. Was that phase in 88 something that was easy to assimilate to get into, or did it have its own set of hurdles?
I think it was easier for me for a couple of reasons. First, I flew the C-141. It's a crew aircraft, a lot of standardization and everything else. And the major airlines were, implementing a lot of the same kind of standardization policies which is just normal world for all of us now. But back then, there were some airlines that were, a little slow to kind of grasp the old crew concept and, what do you call it?
Now it's threat and error management. Before it was
CRM,
CRM,
crew resource management.
Yeah, and so being in the military, crew resource management was pretty much the way the world that I was used to when I was flying the heavies. So that was, and I basically, honestly, the C-141, especially when we were flying in the U.S., was just flying like a military airliner, basically. A little bit different. I got a chance to fly all over the world and see, parts of the world that I never thought I would see, and some parts I really never want to see again. But anyway, it was a big adventure, and I'm in my 20s. I'm young, and I can sleep whenever I want, and it's not a problem. Doing all these long flights and time zones, whatever, it doesn't bother me. But the other thing I think that helped is that when I actually went into the military thinking that this is just a step for me, and I'm not planning on making it a career. Because again, at this point, I really know nothing about the military, and I'm thinking I don't want to be there, as a career guy. Now, after I was there for a while, I realized, oh wow, this is really nice, and you get to work with amazing people, and then the pilot training was like the best in the world, and I really came to learn that if it didn't work out, my dream of being an airline pilot, having a career in the military was going to be a good thing, But I was still kind of leaning toward, getting out as soon as I could to get on with the airlines, because they told me this thing called seniority was important, and the sooner you can get hired by an airline, the better. I didn't really understand. I guess I understood the theoretical aspect of that, but it took me a long time to finally understand the practicality of seniority, because when you actually get it and you live it, you realize, oh, yeah, I see what they mean now. But anyway, so that was another thing. I mean, I was reading magazines about airlines and airline flying, and so for me, again, it was an easy transition going from military to civilian. Yeah. And funny thing is, many, if not most, well, definitely most of the people that I went through pilot training with in the Air Force who were going to make careers of it, most of them did not. Most of them got out as soon as they could, and most of them are flying for Acme Airlines. Mm-hmm. It was like all these people that would, if I'd told them back in our military days that, they would be flying for an airline, they'd look at me and like, what are you talking about? That's the last thing I ever want to do. And most of them came over, but I think they just kind of got disillusioned with a lot of the things that, I think one of the big things is the fact that you think that you're going to fly an airplane the whole 20 years or 20 years plus that you're going to be in the military. And when you get in there and you're an officer first, pilot second, and that's true. And what you realize is that, you're not going to be in there are exceptions to this, very rare exceptions, I think. But, to make a full military career, you're going to have to do some time at the Pentagon, and you're going to have to do all these different things, non-flying jobs and that kind of thing. And that can be frustrating and cause disillusionment.
Terry's smiling emphatically.
I was going to say, Terry. I was thinking Terry. I think he's probably going, "Oh yeah, he's right."
He retired from the Pentagon.
Okay,
so he knows everything you're describing is like you're outlining Terry's.
Yeah, preaching to the choir.
Military career. Yeah,
exactly.
Now you mentioned the Acme. Now we all know Acme is an alias to a big.
No, it's a real carrier. Airline. What are you talking about?
Okay, sure. I'll buy a ticket tomorrow. Why did you choose Acme, or did Acme choose you?
I don't know why, but I wish I could use the real name of the airline. I'd always heard that this particular major carrier, Acme, just had a really good reputation. At the time, they had never furloughed anybody. Now, I knew all the research that I did about the airline industry that just because a company has never furloughed anybody or any pilots in the past doesn't guarantee, past results don't, guarantee future whatever.
Yeah.
Past performance, future results. I always get that messed up. Anyway, by the way, in the podcast, Airline Pilot Guy, we have a 50% guarantee. I should have mentioned that right off the bat, that about half of everything I'm saying is probably wrong. No, but
you've said you've listened to at least the beginning of this show at one point, so we have a disclaimer at the beginning of every single show that the views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. Furthermore, any stories and tells shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner they're told. They may or may not have even happened at all. So your entire bio here could be completely fabricated. That's okay, because we have the disclaimer at the beginning of the show.
So what I'm doing is the most of everything, almost 100% of it is right. I'm pretty sure. Now, I guess maybe if it's not completely right is because, hey, I'm an old guy now. I'm 64 and a half years old. So that's possible.
You're still very young, sir.
Yeah, you can use that as an excuse.
You're still very young.
I'm losing my mind. So I don't know. Maybe my memories are just not quite as clear as they used to be.
Now, we mentioned earlier that you did study accident investigation in flight safety school. Was that part of your military training?
Yeah. When I got back to Columbus Air Force Base as an instructor pilot, the second job, I knew that they were grooming me to be a flight commander, and I'm thinking, that means I'm going to have to write all these OERs or OPRs, I think they call them now. And I think, I don't want to do that. I mean, I hate even doing my own. I mean, I don't know what it's like now. And if it's different in the different services. But in the Air Force, basically, every year you have an officer performance report, or as I said, they called them OER, officer evaluation report back in my day. And so you basically write your own performance report, and then you get somebody important that is a higher rank and whatever. Terry knows what I'm talking about here, to sign it. And that's more important really than anything, is who's signing it, not what you've put in the narrative or what the person evaluating you who's supposed to be writing this. And the funny thing is about these performance reports is that if you read these, if we read Terry's officer performance reports, you would think that he was like a superhero. Because if you don't sound like you're a superhero, you're not going. I mean, it's not a good.
You have to display confidence at all levels of the game.
Like if you have something like a little hiccup on your engine, well, that would read, that was like a near disaster. You just saved the lives of countless people and all kinds of money for the military and everything else. And you go, well, that's not true. I mean, they're all, I don't know, maybe they've fixed this since I've been in the military, but back then it was just like everybody was like God's gift to being an officer or God's gift to pilots. Anyway, so I didn't want to write.
We see that here in the civil aviation industry as well. Airline pilots, when they're new, are on probation, and over at Legacy, they have what's called a probationary report. The captain will receive a probationary report for the pilot that they're flying with, and at the end of their sequence, they're supposed to fill it out. And I can't tell you how many times the captain handed me his or her iPad and said, "Here, fill out your progress report or your probationary report." And I'd be like, "Really?" And they're like, "Yeah, just, be honest or I'll throw it away." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I tap in there and same thing. I'd be like, I'm just very, good with the uniform and always ahead of the airplane and and he's going to make a great captain someday. And then I go, "Here you go." And they look at it and they look at me and they look at it and look at me and they go, okay.
So is that what I need to do to get them to write them for me?
No, you have to write it for them. Say, "Hey, just hand me your tablet. I'll fill it out for you."
I've never even thought of doing that. That's a brilliant idea, Tony. Is that something that you're familiar with, Terry? Do they do that?
I haven't had that experience yet. I wish I had, though.
Yeah, because I usually, I just signed in. I'm flying a trip tomorrow, just a very short little Atlanta to Gainesville, Florida and back, first half of the day. And when I checked my schedule and logged on to the computer, it got presented with this performance report that I'm going to have to fill out, probationary pilot report or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
And I'm going, oh, okay. That's my first clue that the person I'm flying with has not been around for very long.
Yeah.
And I thought, crap, I got to do another one of these stupid things. But I never thought about having the person that I'm flying with on probation fill all this stuff out. That's
it's actually a good tell. I used to do that back in the day as well. Rob, did you do that too ever?
Yeah, I did. But I was also, not to change the subject, but I also do that for people that are asking for letters of recommendation. You end up get a little circle of friends, and I'm like, well, why don't you just write it, send it to me, and I'll change what I need to, and I'll, add my name and sign it. But yeah, I used to take the probationary report back at Sandpiper days. It used to be on paper, right?
Yeah.
So we used to hand it over to the to the FO, and he'd fill it out, and you'd turn it in. So yeah.
Have you seen any of these new ones? Over at Legacy, they've completely changed them, and I had a captain show me like the questions that they ask. It is no longer what you would think that a probationary report should ask.
Really?
Back in the day, it was like 12 questions. Were they on time? Was their uniform, professional?
Right.
Were they clean cut, clean shaven? Shirts pressed, that kind of thing. Did they have a good knowledge and understanding of the airplane systems? Did they make good sound decisions? That kind of thing. Things that you would expect. Now, some of these questions, I mean, they're like, will they get along with others? And are they accepting to different people's point of views and lifestyles?
I was thinking the wokeness stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it is over at Acme or over at Transglobal.
No, it's not like that.
No comment. No comment.
I'm still on probation, so no comment.
I think ours still only have 5 questions. I mean, it's
really?
very, very simple. And it's all related to actually pretty much flying the airplane and getting along and with the crew and the whole crew, that kind of thing. But no, it hasn't gone woke.
Hasn't gone there yet. Buckle up, Buttercup, because here it comes.
I'm going to be out of here soon, so y'all have fun with it.
You keep saying that, but I've heard things. I've heard age 67. It's like right around the corner.
No,
your RV has not been delivered yet, sir.
I'll be on the record right now, and I've said this so many times to so many people asking me that question. Well, if they bump it up to 67, are you going to stay another couple of years? And I go, No, I'm out of here. In fact, I don't even know if I'm going to make it to the end of this year because I'm just ready to get on with the next chapter of my life. Yeah. Not that I don't love flying, I do, and it's been an amazing career. I loved every moment of it for the most part. But I'm ready to move on. I've kind of gotten it out of my system.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I'm look forward to hear about the rest of your journey, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Make-A-Wish flight and what we've all been up to in just a moment, right after the break.
Elite. Best of the best. We'll make you better. Best of the best. We'll make you better.
This is the stuff that people would really want to hear us talk about.
It's going out on social media tonight. No. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Well, we've been speaking with Captain Jeff from the Airline Pilot Guy and one of Acme's most senior and fantastic pilots. Now, your story, it goes on. You made it to the airlines. You made it to Acme. Here you were, a new hire. And if you can remember back, the Boeing 727 is where you got your start. Was that a flight engineer position, or did you go right to the right seat?
Nope, flight engineer position. I think most of the big carriers back then, that was just the standard thing. If they flew 727s or any kind of a 3 crew member kind of a cockpit, that's generally where you started. There are exceptions to everything, but at Acme, that was the starting position.
Yeah. Now you're going to have a lot of young listeners. And some may have read about it, but most probably are like, what's a flight engineer? What did they? I mean, they understand the concept, but they really don't know what a flight engineer did. What was the primarily job function of a flight engineer?
Making the captain and first officer look good.
Sometimes harder than others.
Yeah.
Excellent
answer. It is a position where you basically are in charge of running all the systems. And, these airplanes, like the 727, had a bunch of fuel tanks, and you have to continuously transfer fuel from this tank to this tank, and you're doing all kinds of valves and switches and everything else. Air conditioning, that's a big one, especially for some of the captains you fly with. I mean, they'd kind of give you a little, lecture about, what they think is the best way to run the air conditioning packs. And it on the 727 was a little tricky, especially the 200 that we were flying. Anyway, that kind of thing, fuel, hydraulics, air conditioning, that are the big ones. And you were just monitoring things, and all the things that happen that the flight engineer used to do manually and have to pay attention to is mostly now just done with automatics, and which is very nice.
Computers that run it all. The pressurization, I heard, was always a big challenge, especially if you had a pilot that was sawing wood up there with the throttles every time they were changing the thrust levers. That would change like how the flight engineer would have to adjust the pressurization for the cabin as well, right?
Well, we had an auto pressure controller.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, that I don't remember that being an issue. It's more of the air conditioning that's related to the pressurization system that you had to mess with a lot. And but what else was I going to say? It's just kind of paying attention to, I know what I'm going to say now. The electrical system, that was a big one. So we have, like nowadays, you start up an engine and the generator just automatically, looks at the, the frequency and voltage and all that kind of stuff and goes, yeah, we're good. And it just makes this transfer. And some jets, you can't even tell that the transfer from auxiliary power unit to engine generator has even occurred. An airplane like I used to fly for 18 years of my career, the Mad Dog MD-88, it was a hard relay that would click in, and sometimes it would even knock off the PA system for the flight attendants doing a PA when you're starting up an engine. It was just, not super elegant. The MD-90 was a little bit better. It was a FADEC controlled engine, and it had different electrical system. And sometimes, it'd make the transfer and you hardly even knew that the transfer took place. And that's the way the 717 is, the airplane I fly now. But in those olden days, there was no auto, system to get the generators online. Yeah. And so you had to twist these little knobs, and they're like this little flashing light. And I can't remember now if you make the switch to the engine generator when the light's out or when the light's steady. It's one of those. I can't remember which. But it was like kind of an art. And when you start out, it's just frustrating because you can't, you're just tweaking this thing just to get it just right. And then you try to make the transfer without making it, sound like
transferring within phase of the alternating current. Yeah.
Yes. So that was one of the fun things that you had to learn how to do as a flight engineer on the 727. But,
what were the repercussions if you transferred out of phase?
It wouldn't transfer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or it would be just like one of those hard relay transfer things where, a lot of lights would come on and then go back out again, from what I remember. But the nice thing about being a flight engineer, pilot as a flight engineer, is the fact that, you're watching everything that is going on up here, especially for those military guys that maybe never thought they'd ever be flying in the airlines and really knew nothing about airline life and the way the whole airspace system works and everything else. And even then, I didn't know everything there that I should have known, I think, regarding, airspace. I'll give you an example of that soon, hopefully, if I remember. But it gave me a chance to see, what's going on, how they're talking to the controllers and company and everything else. And so by the time you move up to first officer in an airplane, you already you have an idea of what's going on in the system. One of the first flights that I took as a flight engineer was O'Hare. Atlanta to
Oh, boy.
O'Hare. And I'm not sure how, Terry, how you look like you're a young person, and Rob, you all guys are young. So did you know that O'Hare International, back until probably the early 90s, the taxiways were names. They weren't letters and numbers. And so they had the cargo, the wedge, the inner outer cargo wedge, Wolf, all these weird names for taxiways and stuff. And if you're new and you have no idea what any of that stuff means, it's extremely confusing. But once you've been around there for a while, it's better than, take the Echo to Echo 15, Foxtrot, that kind of thing. It's just the names really just were, exactly what they're talking about. So anyway, they finally transitioned everything to like what everybody else does with alphanumeric taxiway designations. But the thing that just blew me away was that the controller would like spout out all these directions and wouldn't even give you a chance to read it back. It was like they go brake, blah, 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 brake, blah, blah, blah. And we go, wow, how do they even know that we had heard that? And I'm sure that any of you, everybody's smiling. So we've probably all had O'Hare experience. And I've told people, all you do is you kind of have an idea how everything is supposed to be flowing, and you just do whatever you think that you're supposed to be doing. And if you're not, then they'll let you know.
They'll let you know.
They'll
don't stop. Just don't stop.
Yeah, just keep on going.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. But
I tell this story all the time about O'Hare. When I had an O'Hare controller doing his, once a year or whatever, twice a year observation ride. I asked him, hey, what are some, what's the big advice you could give me coming from an O'Hare controller? And he's like, I can give you 3 things. He's like, never stop unless you're going to cross the runway. Number 2, don't cross an active runway. And number 3, never follow Aeromexico. And I was like, all right, sounds good.
Good advice.
Yeah, we've all experienced O'Hare. I was actually based there for 12 years. And it just don't stop. And I didn't know. I heard a couple things about the Orchard, how they had these designations to taxi routes before they were the alphanumeric designation that they are now. Every airport in the country had different airspace. You mentioned you were going to mention something about airspace. So sitting in the engineer spot, what did you learn about that?
Oh, well, no, I don't know if from what I can recall, I was already in a pilot position, but in Atlanta, it could have been when I was still a flight engineer. In Atlanta, before the PRM days, sometimes the downwinds could get quite long, just as they will be when they're doing precision runway monitoring approaches. And they would, obviously they've changed the Class B airspace since those early days. But we'd be going out there, and then all of a sudden the controller would say something like, all right, you're now exiting the Class B or the Class Bravo, or you're exiting the Bravo, whatever. And then we kind of look at each other like, what does that mean? I don't know. Just say Roger. And it wasn't until a couple of years later that I realized that, what that means is there is a speed restriction. You're under one of the Bravo shelves.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to be like no more than 200 knots or the slowest clean speed of your airplane or whatever. And I don't recall exactly what speeds we were flying at the time, but I'm just hoping that we were doing what we were supposed to do. But we just kind of looked at each other like, okay, what? And then we'd even have a conversation sometimes. Well, why do they even say that? I don't know. They're required to say it for some reason. Again, we're not even really understanding what that means for us as pilots operating this airplane. So I just thought that was one of the funny things about airspace requirements.
We're spoiled now. We have
that kind of thing.
These airspaces are pretty straightforward. Of course, there's a couple airports in the nation that have some really weird airspaces, like Denver comes to mind, and some high elevation airports. But back in the day, I can remember when I first started out, I had to learn about all kinds of airspace. I remember One time my instructor said, "Hey, we're going to Palm Springs because it's this kind of airspace. It's not a phonetic letter airspace like Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, whatever." And another place I think was Farmington, maybe. Mexico had a weird airspace. It was basically somebody in a booth at the airfield that didn't have a radar or anything. They just kind of would coordinate all the airplanes that are on the CTAF frequency, basically, and they'd get in there and they'd tell you, okay, well, I got an airplane on downwind, and you're cleared to your own risk, whatever. So now we're a little bit more spoiled. There's a lot more control in the system that is, unfortunately, more busy now than they have ever been, and we see this with all the near misses that we've had.
Yeah.
Now, your experience out on the flight line has spanned over 3 decades now with the airlines, at least.
Yep.
What is the biggest threat that you see with how busy we are now in this airspace?
Communication, and that's if you listen to the Airline Pilot Guy show, I mean, we talk about it. Just about every darn show we mention the importance of communication, and so many. And I know you guys know this as well. When you're talking about incidents, accidents, communication usually a breakdown of, or just not adherence to, listening to what's going on. Maybe I should say communication with an emphasis on listening. Not only, I think there are a lot of pilots out there that don't really hear what is going on the frequency unless it's prefaced by their identifier.
Yeah.
And I think that that's not a good way to operate. You have to listen to everything that's happened. Now, there's things happening inside the cockpit as well. There are a lot of things that we listen to at the same time. But for me, it's really important that I hear everything that's going on out there, because I'm building this mental picture, the spatial awareness, or of
situational
what's
awareness,
happening. Or situational awareness of
your frequency,
where people are on the downwinds, and so I think it's extremely important for those of you listening to the show that are just getting into this world. Don't just listen to what the controller is saying to you. Listen to everything that's going on out there, and it's going to, trust me, it'll be good to have that information at least once in your career, that you'll hear something. And especially when you get down, you just talked about the near misses. Many of them, most of them, maybe all of them recently have involved close in airport operations, runways, active runways, people taking off, people landing, people going around. I think a lot of this could be alleviated by just paying attention to what's happening, building this mental picture, situational awareness, and thinking, is this going to work? And maybe this is what, maybe they were thinking this, it's just they didn't follow through with what they probably should have done, questioning things. I always get, one of my pet peeves is, you're at a big international airport and they tell you to switch to a frequency, but it's not the same frequency that the airplanes, the flights that are using for getting takeoff clearances and everything else. And that always makes me really nervous, because I want to hear if somebody's been cleared for takeoff or not on the runway I'm about to cross. It's just, and I want to also know and hear if I'm in the takeoff position and I'm cleared for takeoff, I want to be able to hear any instructions that have been given to anybody else out there who are also, given clearance to cross my runway. I think it's simple to me, but some places we go, they don't do that. They like to split these frequencies, and I think that's dangerous. I really do. Now, so communication, I would say, is definitely. You've
mentioned this on the show on APG quite a bit, and I love listening to the show because I pick up things, techniques, and styles to maybe try to mimic while I'm on the flight line. One thing that I was taught kind of in a different generation, where the secondary radio was just as crucial as your primary radio. Now, for those that may not be familiar, on the flight deck or in the cockpit, we always have a minimum of 2 radios, most of the time 3 radios, but we only use 2. The primary is usually on the captain's side of the pedestal, and the secondary is usually on the first officer's side of the pedestal. Every airline has their technique. Some airlines use all FAA frequencies are going to be on number 1, and any company or guard frequencies that are being monitored are on number 2. That's the way I was taught. That's the way I operate. Now, you've mentioned, like, I just went into JFK the other day, right? And it's the same thing. And we've heard about the JFK incidents that some of the airlines out there have had, the most recent being the American Airlines 777. Now, in an effort, I was actually based in JFK for about a year when I was a new captain. And one of the techniques I used there was a little off of what standard operating procedures were at the time. I would always put the ground frequency in number 1. I would have ramp frequency in number 2. As soon as I was now in the movement area, there's no reason to listen to the ramp frequency anymore. There's also no reason to listen to guard until we're really airborne. So I would always put the tower frequency in number 2 at a very, very, very low volume. And most of the time I'd look over and either the FO or if I was sitting in the right seat, the captain, they're not listening to number 2 at all. They don't want to be confused. They're busy taxiing the airplane or doing their flows and their performance numbers. So I would do this. Now, it's not something that the company recommends because it is a distractor. However, in an airport where these kind of incidences happen, where you could get a clearance to cross and you don't really know the big picture because you have no idea what the incoming tower controller is saying. So in an effort to have a bigger understanding to get the big picture, that's a technique that I use for a short period of time. Now, I don't use that technique always, and I often forget to use that technique when I should. But there are ways to get around having that big picture, being situationally aware of your surroundings, the frequency. What you said, Jeff, was perfect when you said that we often don't listen on frequency until we hear our company's ID come up. They'll say, legacy, and then your flight number, and all of a sudden, okay, whatever's going on, whatever conversation you're having on the flight deck stops because now, they're talking to me. It's like being in class when you're a kid and you're not paying attention to anything. All you hear is wah, 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 wah. And all of a sudden they hear Tony and okay, and now I got to pay attention. What? So it's kind of the same effect that we fall into sometimes out on the flight line because a lot of what we do is routine and mundane and day in and day out. But it's important, I think, especially when you're in those close operations, as you mentioned, to have a big picture. So there are ways to get around not having the same frequency. However, I absolutely agree with what you were saying. I agreed when I listened. I was sitting there, doing yard work, whatever I was doing, listening to your show, which is one of the things I do when I'm working or swinging a hammer. I love to put in a podcast in earbuds and just tune out while I'm working. And I absolutely agree with you that the communication, the complexity of the communication, it's getting more and more complex with ground metering and ground controllers and north ground, south ground, east tower, west tower, whatever. It's kind of tough.
That and phraseology. I think phraseology is biting people in the butt too. I think some of the controllers take shortcuts too. And I notice it some in the Northeast, when they give you a handoff, they'll be like, Acme 123, New York 123.8. And they just do that. And you're like, okay, I know I got to contact New York on 123.8, but they're not using the phraseology, contact New York on 123.8. It's just simple. It's a shortcut they just took, but it sometimes it creates a lot of confusion in their rush, so just standard phraseology, cleared for takeoff, line up and wait, all those things we were supposed to say. So here we go. Okay, we're holding, or, it's like, come on, dude.
Yeah, I know.
Or read back the hold short, with your call sign, little things like that.
Yeah. And if I know that the controller missed a particular phraseology, I'll 100% of the time, I'll say what they meant to say and read back what they meant to say. And a lot of times I get, thank you, Legacy, thank you. Because they might say something and abbreviate it because they're juggling a lot up there in the tower.
Oh yeah.
And so sometimes they'll abbreviate something and because they'll get on us. They'll get on us immediately and going, taxi to runway 27 via Alpha Bravo Kilo, and you say Alpha Bravo Kilo. Hey, I need you to read back the runway, yes, sir. Or you won't say hold short. You'll just say 27 Alpha Bravo Kilo. I need you to say hold short. So there are controllers that will get you on the phraseology verbatim. all the required elements of it at least. So if they skip it because they're overwhelmed or they need a break or whatever, if I catch it, I'll always just read it back anyway. I'm not trying to be a smart ass or anything like that. I just trying to fill in the gaps so that, hey, when we work from the hearing backwards, yes, we understood that pilot over there at Legacy read it back correctly or whatever.
Nice.
So, now,
Wholeheartedly agree.
Speaking of communication, what we're dying to find out about is how you started your very first podcast, or this journey in podcasting with the Catholic Pilot Podcast.
All right. So yeah, Catholic Pilot. People are going, what? What is he talking about? That was my first aviation podcast. And it's basically the same one that we're doing now. It's just, it has transformed into something a little bit different than it started out. But I got started listening to podcasts like many people that are involved in podcasts do. I mean, I think it's a pretty common thing where you listen to somebody podcasting. Maybe you get up the nerve to record something and you send it in as audio feedback, or at least email some feedback in or whatever. And it's kind of fun to hear your we have this feedback from Jeff and in Atlanta, and it's like it gives you the hairs on your arm stand up a little bit. Oh wow, that's kind of cool. They mentioned my name, and then if you really get hardcore and you start sending in audio feedback, it's inevitable that you'll probably end up at least being a co-host on somebody's podcast, or maybe starting your own podcast, right?
Yeah.
And I know most people are going, oh yeah, that's me. But so I became transitioned to Catholicism back in the late 90s. And during the process, just a couple of years after I came into the Catholic Church, this podcasting thing became, something going on. And I've always been interested in technology and stuff. So I thought that's kind of cool. Actually, I was listening to, I was a home brewer, a very serious home brewer, starting in the mid 80s through the end of the 90s. And I was like really into it. That was my super serious hobby. And there was something on the internet. This is before, I think, even the World Wide Web, called email digests, where it was like a messaging group, and then somebody would compile like the day's messages going back and forth, and then they'd email you that, and then you'd look at it. And then there were some like very it was very kind of a rare thing, but people were doing audio things using real audio. And this is not streaming. This is not, we didn't have the bandwidth back there for internet to stream like what we're doing right now. Just like, it would have blown me away back, in the late 90s to see what we're doing now, especially with the resolution that we have with I don't know if you remember the video back in the day where it was like super pixelated, like, huge blocks of stuff. You could go, kind of, that looks kind of like a person's face. And now it's just like 4K, it's like no big deal. Anyway, so yeah, I was really into audio technology and listening to podcasts, and I found out that I guess right about the time the Apple iPhone came out, iTunes came out with the podcasting feature. I'm thinking, I started looking through, there are a lot of people podcasting out here. Maybe I can find a podcast about Catholicism, because I'm always, wanting to learn more and more. And so I've stumbled upon this guy called Father Roderick von Hogen, and a Dutch priest, and he was doing this podcast called Catholic Insider, I think. And he was taking his little Sony mini disc recorder and a microphone and headphones and walking around. And he'd go to like Dublin, Ireland, and walking along in the streets and kind of telling us what he's seeing. So we're there, we're listening. We can hear all the street musicians in the background. It's just loved it. I couldn't get enough of listening to Father Roderick and the Catholic Insider. And let's see, he was in Rome at a some media creators, or they probably didn't call it that, some kind of a media thing. that he was attending when Pope John Paul II got sick for the last time and then passed away. And then they had the conclave and the whole, everything was going on. It was like, but he was there the whole time, like every day, putting out content and walking through the plazas and the anyway, it was like, I'm there. I'm witnessing this through my ears, and I feel like I'm right there with them. So I really got turned on about listening to podcasts, and especially his. And I was listening to several. Adam Curry had a podcast called The Daily Source Code. I don't know if you ever listened to that. But that was, and Adam Curry, as you mentioned earlier in the show, was like one of the podfather, people call him. He's like one of the earliest ones out there, doing this podcasting thing. Yeah. And so I listened to, it wasn't all just Catholic podcasts. I wasn't listening to any aviation podcasts at the time though. So I became involved in this. Well, Father Roderick and another couple, actually in the Atlanta area, outside of Atlanta and Conyers, they had Greg Willits had started doing a podcast, and he and his wife. He finally convinced his wife to do it too, and so they had the Rosary Army podcast, and then they were starting to collaborate a little bit with Father Roderick in the Netherlands. And they kind of decided, you know what, we should do like a network. So they came up with this idea of a Catholic podcasting network, and that in turn created a nonprofit called at first it was called the Star Quest Podcasting Network, SQPN, and then it became Star Quest Production Network because new media became more than just podcasting. And so early on, I met them when Father was over here in Atlanta for Eucharistic Congress, and I met Greg and Jennifer, and I met Father Roderick. And I said, hey, I'm really excited. You guys are like celebrities in my mind, and I'm just so honored to be able to talk to you and see you in person. And, I just want to let you know I'm an airline pilot. And he goes, oh, Captain Jeff. A few months before this, I'd sent in some audio feedback to Father Roderick. And I took this old little recorder that we used to use for like college lectures and stuff like really not high quality at all. But I found this in my drawer and I went, ooh, I should probably make a podcast, like an audio when I'm in the airplane. And so I'm flying over South Carolina somewhere, and I said, hey, this is Captain Jeff, and I'm flying over some part of the United States at 30-something thousand feet, blah, blah, blah. And I knew I didn't want to use my real full name because I knew that what I was doing was not kosher. And so I said, and at the end of it, I said, sit back, relax, and enjoy the Daily Breakfast, I think was the show that he was doing at the time. And then I sent that in, and the very next episode of his show, he starts the show with my audio feedback, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's actually using and starting to, and he goes, yeah, that was great. Cool. He said, I want other people to send me stuff like this, and so I can start the show like that. Anyway, so when I met him in Atlanta, he seemed to be excited to meet me as I was excited to meet him. We're like the two little kids giggling. And I met Greg and Jennifer, and I said, look, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be a stalker. I mean, I'd love to like hang out with you guys the whole time, but I understand that's you don't do that. And I said, I just want to let you know that I have these things called buddy passes, and that you guys might be able to take advantage sometime. And I would be more than happy to contribute that and pay for whatever fees are involved and everything else, help you guys, especially like going across the Atlantic Ocean, that kind of thing with Father Roderick. So a couple months later, I was on layover in Dayton, Ohio. I still remember the hotel room. And I get this call from Jennifer that says, hey, are you, is this Captain Jeff, the guy that offered the passes? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, we, our show and a couple of Father Roderick's podcasts were nominated for the podcasting awards thing and whatever. And it was being held in Ontario, the Podcast and New Media Expo in 2007, I think it was. And we'd love to go out there and, receive our awards in person. And we were wondering if we could still do that. And I said, oh, yeah. So I kind of started to help coordinate that. And I ended up going with them out there because they ended up staying at my sister's house in Southern California. And I thought, it might be best for me to be out there, these strangers, my sister doesn't know who you people are. And I was the van driver. I was the gopher, basically. I was driving them around and kind of just doing anything that they needed me to do while we were at this big conference. And so I kind of got involved pretty early on with this nonprofit, this podcasting network. And I was on the board of directors and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't have my own, I wasn't a podcaster myself. But as I mentioned, I love technology. I love gadgets, like the recorders and the microphones and the mixers and all this stuff is like toys to me. I love them.
Yep.
And I thought, man, I really want to start a podcast. What the heck am I going to talk? Well, it's got to have to be Catholic something, because every show on the Catholic Podcasting Network was Catholic in a small town, Catholic history, Catholic insider, Catholic. You get the idea.
Yeah.
Okay, what am I going to do? The only thing I know to talk about is like my job, flying airplanes. So I came up with this idea, Catholic pilot, kind of basically living your faith in the work environment or whatever. And so I kind of just put that out there on one of our post-conference. So we were holding yearly conferences around the country, new media conferences, kind of teaching people how to podcast and do other things in new media. And so we were having a board of directors meeting after the one in San Antonio ended. And I just kind of put this out there. This is what I'm thinking. And I was really kind of expecting them to go, I don't know. That doesn't sound like a really good idea. And they all went, oh yeah, they were all very encouraging and everything. I went, oh, okay, cool. So, I started my podcast, Catholic Pilot, on layover in Memphis with a H2 recorder, and just an old, I don't know, wasn't a very good microphone, and that was it. And honestly, when you started the show, you're talking about the fact that you had this passion to kind of share your journey and all this kind of stuff, which is awesome. And I always tell people when they ask me about starting a podcast, I say, well, don't do what I did. I say, you have to have a passion for something you want to share with somebody, some kind of a message you want to put out there. Honestly, for me, it was like I wanted to play with the recorders and the interfaces and the microphones, and I had to have something to talk about, an excuse to do it.
Yeah.
That was and it was, again, I said, don't do it like that because you probably won't last very long. I was lucky. People actually started listening to it. But what I realized really, really quickly was that people could care less about what I had to say about Catholicism. It was all about when you guys go to a party, they find out you're a pilot. Okay, what happens?
Do they let you land the airplane?
It's just like one question after another.
What's your route?
Yeah, what's your route?
Yeah, that's the number one, right? And so like that's what this podcast was becoming. I was at a cocktail party and people were asking me all these questions about flying airplanes and layovers and all that kind of stuff, and I'm thinking, I think that this is. I need to rebrand this thing. I just need to make this a secular show and make it my own thing. I was doing another community kind of a podcast with the network at the time as well. So I rebranded about a year and a half after I started the show to Airline Pilot Guy. I don't know. Do you remember that commercial? Again, you guys are younger, a lot younger than I am, but there was a Bud. I think it was it Bud Light or Geniuses,
Real American hero.
Man of genius.
Exactly.
Mr. Discount Airline Pilot Guy.
There you go. That is one of the ways, or one of the reasons that I use to get Airline Pilot Guy. Instead of Discount Airline Pilot Guy, I'm just going to be Airline Pilot Guy.
Awesome. Now it's all making sense now.
And then I was also listening to this guy called the Tech Guy, Leo Laporte, on the Twit, what's the Twit stand for, Tony?
I don't even know.
This Week in Technology, I think.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, Leo Laporte, loved him and his voice and the way he ran his shows. Just an amazing podcaster. So he was the tech guy. So I'm thinking the tech guy, Discount Airline Pilot Guy. I'm just going to rebrand it Airline Pilot Guy. So there you go. That's how I came up with the concept. And then I also, before I started doing before I hit the record button on the Catholic Pilot, I thought, I should probably go to the chief pilot and ask permission to do a show and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, and nobody knew what a podcast back then was.
Right.
And I'm thinking, I don't think I'm going to be very successful in this endeavor. So I'm not going to ask, and I'm not going to use the name of my airline, just like, you guys use aliases for the real airline you're flying with. And so I started doing some research and coming up with all these different names. And I'm thinking, I remember the Roadrunner cartoon. Acme was always the Wile E. Coyote was always using stuff from Acme to try to blow up the Roadrunner. And I thought, I wonder if there's an Acme Airlines out there. I did all this. I did not find any evidence of an Acme Airlines anywhere in the world. I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to say. That's who I'm going to fly for. So I'm just going to try to do this under the radar. And so far, I started in the fall of 2009. And so far, I have not been asked to come and talk to anybody at the company, the real company that I work for, and explain myself. So
now they know now. Right.
I guess. I don't know.
The chief pilot doesn't know?
Probably not.
You're not recognized on your flights? I've heard people come out to the gate. No, that's Captain Jeff.
No, but
Tony's
I think it's mostly
all over the crew room.
Everywhere.
Hey, by the way, you know who I am, don't you?
Yeah.
I got my posters up there.
Yeah.
No, I'm like, like if somebody, I feel like somebody's recognizing me. Like, shh, don't talk too loud. I'm still trying to stay under the radar. And I got contact. Well, maybe I can talk to you offline about this recent conversation I had with another Acme pilot regarding that. But anyway,
I'm guessing it's the change of your intro. You no longer say the city in which your airline is based, and now you say U.S. carrier.
You're a very smart man.
I'm astute. I'm astute.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Pay attention.
Well,
did you say you're a stooge or astute?
Oh,
okay.
Not a stooge. I was wondering about that. And because anyone can put two and two together that's in the industry.
You'd think so, Tony. You'd think so. I still have people go, I figured out who Acme is. American Airlines.
And you're like, oh, yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
yeah, that's it.
That's it. You got it.
That's like when you're at a bar. Who do you guys fly for? United.
No, it's for us.
American.
Southwest.
Yeah, Southwest.
Who has the best discount? That's the one.
321 Southwest. You have your badge? I left it in the room. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
Yeah. So,
well, you mentioned you were a huge home brewer. Do you still do that?
No, when I was in my old house in the 90s, toward the end of the time that we ended up selling the house or getting close to that, we had to start focusing on getting things ready to sell the house. And I found I wasn't having time to do the home brewing thing. And then the kids were getting older too. The kids transition from being little toddlers and they're not very involved in extra, curricular activity. Yeah. And then they end up doing more and more extracurricular activities. Yeah. And I'm sure you guys feel the same way if you have children where, you're gone on a 3 or 4 day trip and you come back home and the last thing you want to do is just like, oh, okay, I'm out of here. I'm going to go play golf or, do something else. I want to help out with everything I can at home because I know that my wife is doing everything while I'm gone, so it just got to the point where I just didn't have the time to do it anymore. So I thought, okay, we're about to sell the house. I'm going to just pack all this stuff up, going to put it in boxes. When we move into our new place, we'll start, I'll get back into this again. And then over that time, that transition time, more and more awesome brews show up in your grocery store. It's like part of the reason why I was doing my own brewing was that you go to the grocery store back in the 80s and it's just like Budweiser, Coors, it's like all
Busch beer.
And I'm not putting any of those down, but it didn't have any of the great craft brews out there, and now, I find myself in the new house and I'm thinking, well, I could get back into this again, but I can just go to the local Publix or Kroger and just buy some awesome beer. Why, so I never got back into it. Yeah, but I loved it.
It's hard to do as an airline career pilot because, you're gone and you're gone for 3 or 4 or 5 days at a time. And unless you have like a neighbor that can kind of come out and take care of temperature checks and the timing of when the batch should be pulled and all that stuff, it's kind of difficult and it's time consuming. And like you said, life seems to always get in the way.
Yep.
My brother-in-law's a I wouldn't call him a master brewer, but he did the same. And then of course now he's got the brew shed out back next to the smoker. He's, good old boy from Texas. And I love going over there and going, oh, you got anything? He's like, no, I haven't done anything in a while.
Yeah. I was actually studying to be a beer judge. They have this beer judge program. And I thought that would be really cool and travel around the country. I'm an airline pilot. I can go wherever I want, and, but I was, keeping track of all the points I was getting for, helping out on competitions and that kind of stuff, and learning all the different styles. And yeah, unfortunately, it just kind of, that part of my life, just kind of that chapter folded.
Well, in about a year, you might be able to get
I don't know, but I'm going to be traveling around the country in a house on wheels. That's going to be hard to homebrew.
Judging, maybe, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Doing the judging thing?
Doing online reviews of local macro brews.
Or maybe I'll just buy a 6-pack at the grocery store and sit in my camper and drink my 6-pack of beer. I don't know. It sounds easier.
Oh, man. I just pictured an RV and an older chemist in his tighty-whitey underwears cooking meth on the side of the road in Albuquerque.
That's why I ended up getting bitten by the RV bug, was watching that show, Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad.
That's not why. That's not how.
Now, speaking of beer affection and beer aficionados, your co-host, your crew, how, if you could just briefly run us down how you met each and every one of them. Briefly.
Okay.
Because I know this is a road.
Yeah, I know. As I said, I told you, I warned Tony before we started the show or recording here that, once you get me talking about something, man, be ready to just cut me off, because I'll just keep on going for hours. That's one of the, the things that's good for being into podcasting is, having the gift of gab.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, I started off as Catholic pilot. I did that for a year and a half, probably 45 episodes, something like that. So actually, right now tomorrow we're going to be recording episode 566. So that's when it was, started, from my first APG show in May of 2011 to now. And so honestly, I never had any plans for this. I, as I mentioned before, I didn't really even care if anybody was downloading the show. I just wanted to, play like I was a radio guy. And then the show became more, as time went on, got a little bit more popular. And then it really started growing when I transitioned from Catholic pilot to airline pilot guy. And everything that's happened with the growth of the show and the community has all been just natural evolution, just organic. I've never planned anything. It just happens. And people ask me all the time, like you just did, like, well, how did you end up picking these people? And actually, they kind of picked me to be on my, it's not like I was actively seeking to do a show with other hosts. I thought I would do a solo show for as long as I ended up podcasting. And then I started getting some feedback from a lady in the Carolinas. And she said, hey, because I was talking about my love of craft beer. And she goes, I love beer too. I love IPAs just as you do. And she said, here in North Carolina, man, there are a lot of breweries making some just outstanding beers. And she said, if you have time to go and, drink some North Carolina beer, I'll come by and pick you up in the Jeep, and got this big giant dog, and we'll go and of course, Steph, we always talk about her driving the Jeep, and every opportunity that Steph has, she takes the doors off, the top off of the Jeep. It's just, she's an amazing person. Anyway, so we did this for, I don't know, maybe 2, 3, 4 layovers that I had in the Charlotte area. And one of the layovers that I was going to have the next time I was going to be in Charlotte, I got in at like 9 o'clock in the morning. And I said, this would be perfect for a perfect day for recording the show. And I'm thinking, I know that Steph's here, and I'm wondering if she might be interested in being a co-pilot, a co-host on the show. So I presented her with that, and she said, oh, yeah, that'd be fun. And I went, okay, great. And so, now I'm looking back thinking, God, that was kind of creepy. This older guy, I'm old enough to be your father. I don't know how many years older than I am. I than she is, but quite a bit. And inviting her to come by my hotel and, us do a podcast in my hotel room must have been super creepy. But I guess because she knew me and we had, done these brewery tours a couple of times, she knew she could trust me. Anyway, we recorded the show with her, and the audience loved it. And I'm thinking, oh, okay.
Was she a pilot back then?
Yes, she was a commercial. I think she had her multi-engine, or maybe just before she got the multi-engine rating. But I think she was a commercial instrument. But she wasn't flying for her jump zone. She was a skydiver, but she wasn't yet a skydiver pilot. Mm-hmm. But she's a doctor, a doctor of osteopathy, does surgical spinal injections and that kind of thing. And so about 6 weeks later, I'd planned to do a meetup down in Miami, and I'd done a few down there and met this guy who had been sending me audio feedback named called himself Miami Rick. And so I let him know, hey, I'm going to be down here and we're going to do this meetup. It's going to be kind of near the airport, and where we lay over is not really near the airport. And he goes, hey, I'm off that day. I'll come by and pick you up and take. I said, oh, you're off, huh? I said, would you be interested in maybe like being like Steph did, a few weeks back, and being my co-pilot? And he goes, oh yeah, that'd be fun. So Miami Rick, 6 weeks after Steph. They know the seniority. Yes. I didn't. In my mind, I had mixed the thing up. I thought that Miami Rick was the first one, but it was actually Steph. She made sure to point that out. And so we did that. And again, great audience reaction. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm doing that other, I mentioned that I was doing this other show for that Catholic network. It was a community show. It started right off the bat with panelists. We do like an hour-long show. I know that you're thinking there's no way you could possibly do an hour-long show, Jeff, but yes, we tried to do it so that like Catholic radio stations could pick up the show if they wanted to play it on their radio station, that kind of thing. So we tried to do the radio format and doing the breaks, how they would do the breaks every 15 or whatever, And so I had experience with doing a panel show. And I'm thinking, after doing that with Steph and Rick, I'm thinking, I really enjoyed having other people to kind of bounce things off and interact with and everything else. And I think the audience liked it. And I thought, I'm going to ask them. I'm pretty sure I know what their answer is going to be, but I thought I'd ask them anyway. Say, hey, would you guys be interested in doing this like on a regular basis? And both of them like immediately didn't even hesitate. Oh, yeah, we'd love to. Or I'd love to. I went, wow. Okay. Well, here, I guess we're doing this. And so that's how it became a panel kind of a show. Yeah. And I never looked back. I've done a couple every now and then just by myself, mainly because of necessity. Yeah. I know, Tony, you know all about scheduling, and especially if you're doing this with a bunch of other pilots, it's like, it's crazy. That's the hardest thing about doing a panel podcast, really, is getting everybody together in one place at same time. But so the three of us did our show that was the beginning of 2015, and in 2016, again, I'm going to be talking too much, but we had a big. Steph and Rick said, "Hey, look, we figured out that the 200th episode is going to happen right around the first part of the year, 2016, January, the first week of January, and we're thinking we should do something special." I went, okay, and so unbeknownst to me, they had planned this big thing, almost like a surprise party. Brought in people from the UK. One of them happened to be this guy named Captain Nick, and Captain Al and Pip. Captain Al and Pip. It's Pip's podcast, but Captain Al's on it all the time. Called the Plane Safety Podcast. They're all in cahoots, working together to make a trip over to Miami to surprise me and everything else. So anyway, the 200th episode was a great surprise and an amazing time. And Captain Nick had been sending me audio and kind of built a character called the Old Pilot, the Old Curmudgeon. And he would send me audio and just complain about us Yanks and how we do everything wrong. But it was a really interesting character, and a lot of people I knew listened over there in England and in Europe. And anyway, while he was there, I didn't have any idea that he was going to be there. I took Steph and Rick aside and said, "Hey, what do you think about asking Nick to be a kind of full-time co-host. And they thought, oh, that'd be great. So I took Nick aside and I said, hey, would you be interested in, being a full-time host on the show? And he, I'd be honored. I'm not good with accents or imitating other people, but so he immediately said, I'd love to do that. And so that's how Captain Nick became part of the show.
Yeah.
And over time we've had, Captain Dana, he was with us for about 3 years, I think, maybe a little bit more. When Miami Rick was changing jobs and went from land cargo to Acme Giant.
Acme Giant, yeah.
Mm-hmm. See, I almost messed that up. He kind of dropped out for a while, and so I thought, I kind of like to have one more co-host. So I asked Dana to be on our show. So he did that for, as I said, for about 3 years. It was great, and then just recently, I had several layovers in Wichita, Kansas, and one of our listeners, I met up with him several times, Nick Camacho. And then one of the times I was there for the layover, I said, well, I'm recording the show today. And we'd kind of planned to get together afterwards and get some barbecue or whatever. And I said, hey, you want to be on the show? And he goes, yeah. And so, he was on the show and really interacted well with all of us and had, a different perspective. He's a aerospace engineer and he's also a private pilot. He's got his own airplane, did a whole renovation on a Beechcraft Debonair. And his dad has a Luscombe, and so he flies the Luscombe and the Beechcraft Debonair. And so just having that different perspective. And he joined us a couple of times, and I asked him to become, a regular on our show as well. So that's how all the host, and you see, there was a time when Nick was still actively flying. He had a 2-day layover in Atlanta, and this is great. And Steph flew over from Charlotte, and Liz came down from Toronto, and everybody was in physical, like in real life, and physically in the same spot. And I thought, this would be a great opportunity to have a business meeting and to kind of like see where the show has been, where we are now, and where we want, like a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And then like a couple days later, I thought to myself, Jeff, you're an idiot. Why in the world would you do that now? You've never, ever planned any of this, and you're probably going to ruin it if you do something like this. So instead of our business meeting, we just went out on Dana's boat, his pontoon boat, and just spent most of the day in this lake on the northwest side of Atlanta, just floating in the water and drinking alcoholic beverages.
Sounds like a business meeting to me.
See? I'm telling you, you and Roger need to fly out to Dallas, and we'll get Kyle and
Alex.
Who's the one flying? Alex. Sorry, Alex.
Don't worry, I'll edit that out.
We'll get him. Sorry, Alex. We'll get him out on the pontoon boat and have one of these the same kind of meetings.
Yes, I highly recommend it. Highly recommend.
And Liz came into the fray early on as well. Yeah.
Yeah. She. It's interesting. Her recollection of how things happened it was a little bit different than how I recalled it happening. But regardless, she probably knew that I needed somebody to help me out as far as organizational. I'm terrible. I'm a terrible business person. I'm not good at organizing anything. I procrastinate. I think, that's one of the characteristics, I think, of most pilots. Most of us kind of are pretty good at procrastination. And so, before Liz, tomorrow we're doing a show. I would probably wait until like the morning we were doing the show to go, all right, what's happened since the last show? What do we want to talk about?
Let's
see if I have any feedback from Seb. But it's like, that's the way, that's my management style.
Have you been watching me, sir?
Is that what you do too?
The day before I'll go, and one of our guest host, Kyle, he isn't on very often, only a couple times a year, because he's very busy. He's a pilot mentor for the cadet program that Legacy Airlines has. Plus, he's got a newborn at home and a new house and a family. And so he's a busy guy. However, he runs a page on Facebook that he posts probably 4 or 5 articles every single day. The Aviation Business Information Board on Facebook. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Okay. I need to write that down.
Great,
another source of information.
I just, showed you my hand. Okay. So I get a lot of stuff from him. I don't necessarily focus too much on the news because there are other podcasts out there that do a pretty damn good job of it. And I wouldn't want to, step on any toes here or be redundant.
I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't.
So
care at all.
we focus more on the journey and what news affects the aviation career or the career path. But it's a fantastic source. I usually go to that like a day before, and I'll string up some notes. And then, of course, now the text messages go out to the group text, like, okay, who's here? Who's there? Where are you going to be? You know? And so a lot of times, like, I'm ready to do a show, but, none of the co-hosts are, which is fine sometimes. But other times, I'm just flying along, and the captain next to me is like intrigued about the podcast because I have my little business card I hand it out to everyone I fly with. I'm like, oh, by the way, full disclosure, I'm a podcaster. Don't worry, everything you say here is protected unless you tell me otherwise. And so they go, oh, really? Oh, okay. So there's sometimes that sparks into, hey, well, we got a long layover in Miami next week. You want to record a podcast with me? And I'll just sit there and total guerrilla podcast it with, I always have my little lunchbox that's full of microphones and recorders and things like that. And I'll just set up something in the hotel room and we'll go have lunch and, sit there and talk for a couple hours. And that'll be a podcast. So I don't really have that organization. And you're very fortunate that you have it. And I think because you have it, the consistency of your show is mind-boggling. I don't understand how you can produce a weekly show, a 3 hour long content that is engaging the whole time. Yeah. And
production value is amazing.
So when you always, credit Liz, I get it. I absolutely get it.
So she could see that, maybe I could use somebody as an assistant and help with organization and everything else. And so she's retired. She was in the banking industry, Canadian. And I said, oh yeah, I could probably use some help with that. And so I kind of told her, where I went to look at, various aviation stories and that kind of thing. And it's funny, and she's been such a blessing because she really does. She's the opposite of me on the spectrum of organization. I mean, like when we end the show, I think she's already like putting stuff into the next show folder for what we're gonna. I mean, sometimes. I mean, seriously, by the next day after we've recorded the show, I think she's already got the lineup for the next week's show already done. Wow. And she gets kind of a little nervous if she doesn't think that we have enough feedback or enough stories to talk about. And I go, oh, don't worry. Stuff will happen. Stuff will happen don't you worry. It's never, and I said, even if we never had any stories to talk about, I said, with this group of people, we could just like open a telephone book and just start reading people's names and just like making stories about, we could, don't worry. We can make, something in 3 hours, not a problem. And
pilots like to tell stories anyway, so we'll find something.
Exactly. Yeah. And feedback, the same thing. She starts freaking out. Oh, I don't have enough feedback. And I said, trust me, we're going to get feedback. And I said, even if we don't, that's okay. Trust me, it'll work out. It always does. And every time she says to me, yeah, you're right. It all came together. And I said, yeah. But anyway, so she's a huge blessing, does a lot of work behind the scenes, mostly for prepping the show and organizing it that way. And for me, most of the work for me is after we record the show and doing all the post editing and all the stuff you got to do with all this stuff. It's just a lot of things, a lot of bells and whistles and things that have to be taken care of after the fact. So we make a good team.
Yes.
So
and I think the benefit of your long format podcast, I'm asked often, oh, how long is your podcast? And I tell them, my target's 2 hours. I go over when I have a lot to talk about, but sometimes I go under, but not often. Yeah. And I just had someone who works for Legacy Airlines, whose father is a very famous writer in aviation, who writes for Flying Magazine and whatnot. And I had the privilege to have a phone conversation with him because the captain I was flying with knew him. And he goes, oh, man, you should hook up with this guy. So we had a conversation on the phone briefly on a layover. And he's like, so how long's your podcast? And I go, 2 hours. He goes, 2 hours? No, man, you got 15 minutes of my attention. And then I'm off to doing something else. And I said, yeah, that's fine. And that's a valid point. There are a lot of podcasts out there that 15 minutes is about right. However, I've noticed, and I've read a lot about this too, when I was doing the research to start this particular podcast, that you get a lot more loyalty with your listenership when you have a long format podcast, and I don't know what it is about it. They will listen, like you said, they will listen to you read the phone book as long as you don't get stale, boring, or offensive. So, I mean, have you seen and felt the same way about it, or have you ever considered trying to get more listeners by changing? I mean, not that I want you to change a 3 hour. I love your podcast; it's the perfect length. But have you felt that way before?
No, because I never think that way. I never worry about how many people are downloading and listening or anything. Because I don't have advertisers. So it's all based on, value for value. You've heard that term before. And people, if they get value from us entertaining them or informing them, mostly entertaining them every week, then you can in turn give us some value, give us some money if you'd like. For many years, I didn't have any contributions to the show because I didn't even think the reason why I was doing the show was just to have fun, playing with all the toys and talking about something I know something about. And that's it. I didn't even think about somebody actually sending money to me. And then I was listening to one of the many podcasts about podcasting that I was listening to. And they said, you're throwing money away if you don't have a tip jar. And I go, huh? And I started listening thing and okay, maybe, I don't know. Okay. I guess I'll try. And I decided I'd call it, buy me a cup of coffee. We'll make this the coffee fund. And I had a PayPal donation page. And sure enough, people started sending a few bucks here and there and buying me a cup of coffee. And I'm thinking, this is kind of nice. Now it was partially offsetting the amount of money that I was paying to the web host and the media hosting company and all these different things that you have expenses and ongoing expenses for. And then after a while, it started covering exactly that. And then it started coming in more than my expenses. And I just always keep the money separate. It's the coffee fund money. And then every year when we started doing big gatherings, big meetups, like Farnborough in 2016 was our first one. Those things are not cheap. And, booking banquet halls or rooms at a hotel and paying for everybody's hotel rooms and airfare for Steph and all this kind of stuff, that starts adding up. I spent several $1,000s that year. And then the next year we were in Pittsburgh at the Wings Over Pittsburgh Air Show. And again, that was expensive. And then back in Farnborough in 2018. And then Oshkosh was really the last one that we did in 2019. And so that's where the money is. The people that send in money to the coffee fund, I do use some of that money to pay for coffee and beer. But most of it is for equipment and for doing all these gatherings, these meetups. And because that's the way I look at the money. That's what it's for. It's not for me to make a car payment or pay the rent, because that's why I fly airplanes for a living. That's, and so I never actually thought that, doing this, making money in this endeavor, like many people out there think that, they're going to start a podcast and they can quit their real job and be a podcaster for, their career. And some people manage to do do that, but most do not. When I say
very,
most,
very
few.
Very,
99.9% of the people doing podcasts aren't doing this for their living.
Right.
So that's that 1/10% probably that actually can do well in it as far as monetarily. So
that's the number one question I get out on the flight line when somebody hears, you're making any money on it?
Making money.
I'm like, well, I don't do it for the money. And no, I do have some income. I do have some value for value contributors to our show, but it's still in the red. I'm not doing it for the money, like you said. That's what my job is for. This is a very nice hobby that is offset by some contributions for me, at least at this stage in the game. And so
it's a serious hobby.
It's a very serious hobby. And with that comes some pretty big challenges. And what's probably the biggest challenge that you have seen in terms of podcasting and keeping a full schedule?
Trying to keep it below 3 hours a week. So when I started, and again, I didn't want to duplicate what other people were doing out there. And but I something inside, I've always been community oriented because I did that. I started that community podcast at the StarQuest production network called Catholic Weekend. And I always knew that I wanted to answer questions that people had, as you mentioned, the journey, how do you get to where you are? Or just questions that you get from when you go to a cocktail party, that kind of thing. So I decided from the very beginning, and believe it or not, when I started, I didn't have 3-hour shows. I had maybe 45 minutes to an hour. And then as time goes on, it just gets longer and longer. And the reason for that is that I take a considerable chunk of the time doing the show every week by doing feedback, answering people's feedback.
Right.
And I kind of made a promise to myself that I will answer everybody's feedback on the show. And that's why over time it kept getting longer, because as the audience grows, you get more feedback. Yeah. And then I finally got to the point where, okay, and so the way I break it down is, we do a news segment, then we break and talk about what everybody's been doing, and then we move on to the feedback section. And then also every once in a while we have Captain Nick doing Plain Tales, which is an awesome thing. He's so creative.
That's one of my favorite ones.
20-minute thing that he does. And my favorite, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but is when he takes his RAF Form 14, 414, whatever, of his logbook, and basically it's his life, his career in the military days, and then I'm sure he'll continue with his airline days as well. I'm assuming, but those are my favorite, and so that also fits within that, basically the second half of the show where we do the feedback, and it finally got to the point, Tony, where I thought, I can't cover all the feedback. I can't do it because there's just too much. This is going to turn into a 4-hour, 5-hour, 6-hour show, and nobody got time for that. I mean, hardly anybody has time for a 3-hour show. And it's hard for us podcasters because it takes more time for all of us, and then all the editing time. I mean, I don't know about you, Tony, but for me, it's a minimum of 2 to 3 times, however long your show is,
exactly.
Like solid time to do all the editing and all the things that we have to do. And I thought, I don't want to, I just can't do more than a 3-hour show. So I just finally set the limit. And that's what is really helpful with having Liz being my producer. She can go through and she kind of picks, which feedback and, and sometimes, you might send us feedback and we may not cover on the show. Most of the times because we've already covered answering that question. So I don't want to kind of subject people to the same answer over and over and over again. And I get it. People are new. People that are watching your show right now may have never heard of Airline Pilot Guy Show and might start listening to us and then not understand all the things that we've talked about in the last, I started in 2009, a long time ago, so that's how, and by doing that, I didn't do this on purpose, but donating or using so much of the time of each show with feedback, it develops a relationship with the people that are listening to the show, and they almost feel like it's their show too. And which is exactly what I want it to be. And that's why the community part of this, the aspect of this thing has just exploded. And it's just like it just blows me away. You talked about the fact we have listeners in, Baghdad and I've China and Indonesia. And I've gotten feedback, I think, from every part of this world. Most of the people that listen to the show are in the United States and then, UK and Europe and, but still, it's just a worldwide community and I still think, wow, it just blows me away that it's grown into something. All I really wanted to do is just like make recordings with my little recorder and talk in my microphone, and feel like I'm a talk show host or something, and these people are really into it. You asked me if I were going to be, stopping the show once I retire from flying. I can't. I've realized that I can't stop the show. I mean, people will not let me stop the show.
They will come with pitchforks and.
I know. It's like, I don't want to stop, but I'm thinking, even if I did, I'm thinking I can't. It's just like the snowball is just grown into this giant thing, and I got to keep going. And
out of curiosity. How many listeners do you keep track of these stats and stuff like that? What's how many listeners listen to your show, let's say on a monthly basis? And do you know if there's any one particular show that has, totaled the most listeners for any one show?
Yeah, let me see. I'm going to go into. I use.
And if you don't know, that's no big deal.
Liberated syndication.
Because with the production value that you guys have, I would imagine it's pretty high. And it's got such a great, it's such a great show the way it's put together. I'm very entertained, and I listen to it, quite often.
Yeah, I mean, I to like say exact numbers, let's see,
53%, like we do N1. Yeah, right. Whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a way to find that stat for. So this is the thing. Like, I don't really know for sure because I don't have to know. I mean, if we had advertisers,
it's not important.
I would tell you, like, I wouldn't even have to look at this page that I'm looking at right now. What I can tell you is that. And I've used Liberated Syndicated Libsyn for hosting the media files from the very beginning. And I think this includes my Catholic pilot days. I didn't have a big audience back then anyway, so it doesn't probably matter. But this stat that I'm looking at right now, all-time downloads since I started the show, 9,640,083, according to this stat thing.
Wow. That's amazing.
I'd say probably on a monthly basis. I don't know.
That's amazing, Jeff.
Somewhere between 50 and 100,000 per month, I think.
So you have all these listeners around the world.
Yeah.
What you said was absolutely makes perfect sense. You can't stop now.
Yeah, I know.
There is no exit strategy.
and the thing that people ask me all the time, there is no exit strategy. And another thing, talking about the long format, I mean, Tony and I, are one of our favorite podcasts to listen to is a long format show. And Adam Curry has been doing long format shows since the very beginning. And I always kind of chuckle because the podcast gurus, the podcast experts out there always say, well, you can't, you should shoot for like a half an hour show.
Right.
Or maybe 45 minutes. Hour is absolute. There's no way you could possibly go over an hour. But the beauty of podcasting is, or, listening to podcast is that you can hit pause and then you can come back and listen to it later. And that's the beauty of it, I think. And I love podcasting, audio podcasting, because you can go out there and you're mowing the lawn, as you said, Tony, or riding the bike, or doing whatever your exercise is, or you have a long drive. I mean, I travel, if I do a road trip, I mean, that's my chance to finally catch up with so many of the podcasts that I'm subscribed to, and most of which I never do listen to all of it because I just don't have enough time to do it. Yeah. And luckily, I don't suffer from FOMO when it comes to podcast. And if I don't have a chance to listen to all the shows, or I miss several, I don't feel like I got to go back and listen to all the things that I've missed, because otherwise I would never leave my apartment because I wouldn't have any other thing going on in my life. But.
Yeah, for me it was the I was coming on with these red eyes coming in from Hawaii, and what Legacy was doing for a while. Legacy was doing where you do one leg out to Hawaii on an island, and then you do one leg back like 24 or 30 hours later, and you do a red eye and you go home. Okay, fine. But then they had all these changes in the contract, and the FAR 117 rules started coming into play. So what they figured out was, because we have a min duty reg, meaning if you are flying, deadheading, or working at any point during the day, you have a minimum pay guarantee for that day. Whether you fly 1 hour or 10 hours, you get guarantee or better. So it was a 5.25 duty reg at Legacy. So having one leg back, sometimes you're doing one leg out, one leg back, and you're not quite flying 5 hours, but you're gone for 3 days. So now they got to pay you. You're flying 10, but you're getting paid 15, and they're like, this is not good. So they made their trips a little bit more productive by tacking on flying usually before or after the Hawaii trip. So I was doing these 4-day sequences where you'd end up in Hawaii on day 2, and then you'd red eye day 3 back and land on day 4. And I'd get in the car and try to drive home in LA traffic. As the sun is coming up and in your eyes, and it's bumper to bumper traffic, and nothing worked. I like listening to music, and granted, I was responsible. I made sure I was fit for duty. I slept usually during the day, whatever I could get, and usually 4 hours, 5 hours, about max from what I'm hearing out there. And then I'd fly in the night all the way back. And then in the car, I'd be doing touch and goes with my head while I'm driving. And I thought, I'm going to kill myself or I'm going to kill somebody. This is not good.
So this is what you do, Tony. You roll down the window and stick your head out the window.
Oh, I tried that. That
doesn't work either.
I had all kinds of music.
Put a scarf on too.
I even start, what I was doing that was working for a while is I would drive to the beach and I'd go for a run. And then I'd rinse off at some of the showers there at Manhattan Beach. And then I'd jump in the car and grab like a Gatorade and a sandwich or something. And I'd hit the road. But that took another 2 hours out of my day that, I could have been home 2 hours earlier. So I started listening to podcasts on the way home. And something really interesting happened. I didn't feel as fatigued. And it was simply because the music was very rhythmic, and the traffic and the bumps on the freeway, the dunk, it's very rhythmic. And no matter what music it was putting me to sleep. But now that I listen to podcasts while I'm driving home from those kind of red-eye flights, my mind is engaged. I'm listening. I'm laughing. I'm crying. I'm doing whatever emotion is coming to me by listening to these podcasts. And I'm intrigued because I'm listening to something that I'm interested in.
Yeah, so your brain's engaged. But obviously, you could not have been listening to the Airline Pilot Guy show because so many people have sent me feedback saying that they listen to the show and they fall asleep. Or their wife falls asleep, or they play it to their children and they fall asleep.
No, not me. Maybe because I'm interested. Although, when you start singing, I love coffee, and then I'm sorry,
I like tea.
So
whatever those words are,
whatever they are, don't piss off Steph.
I know Steph always gets upset when I mess up lyrics.
So speaking of entertainment and aviation, do you have a favorite aviation film?
Well, of course, I love comedies. I love aviation.
Is there an aviation comedy film out there?
I think there's, what is it called? Airplane, the movie.
Surely there's something.
And then don't call it Shirley. Very good. That was a good imitation.
Very nice.
Yeah. I like.
Oh my God! The automatic pilot! It's deflating.
All the airport movies are kind of comedies too, even though I don't think they're trying to be. But no, I don't really. I love them all.
Yeah.
How's that for an answer?
Yeah. Airplane is a wonderful film. I actually thought about Fate is the Hunter. Fantastic film. And it kind of gives you an insight to investigations of aircraft accidents. I don't know. Don't leave your coffee there. What was it? India Air? Someone left a coffee somewhere. Got trouble. Yeah. Don't leave your coffee there.
Yeah. Exactly.
Didn't they watch that movie? Come on. For me, it was Only Angels Have Wings. It's an old black and white with Cary Grant. Yeah.
Oh, really?
It talks about the airmail and the early days of the airmail. Oh. Are there any bananas? Nope. No bananas today, meaning no hot chicks coming off the boat. Yeah, but it's a pretty good film. Yeah. Only Angels Have Wings.
Watch that.
Yeah. I think it's free on YouTube. Yeah. Okay. Terry, you have a favorite aviation film?
I hate going with
Don't say Top Gun.
Okay, I won't. Listen, I was 9 years old and I saw that in the theater. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you already mentioned Airplane, so I gotta.
Top Gun is a fave. I think I've seen it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Rob?
And that last Top Gun. I mean, I really was not expecting it to be as great as it is. I'm thinking, they did a really good job with that.
They did.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Rob?
Oh man, I'm all over the place. I like military aviation movies, like even helicopter ones like We Were Soldiers. It's a good one. Mm-hmm. Mel Gibson's The Final Countdown, back about the aircraft carrier, the Nimitz sailing into that storm. Red Tails, that's a good one. So yeah, and definitely the Top Guns. That's always going to be up there.
Yeah. I've been looking at a lot of aviation books lately too. I wish I had a little bit more time to dive into a good novel now and again. I think this podcast edit stuff kind of takes over.
Yeah, take some time.
But a couple more questions before we move on.
Yeah.
Again, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
No, I love this. I mean, this is being part of this podcasting community is just it's what I live for, really. You know, it's I love it.
Well, speaking of the podcasting community in the future, maybe after retirement, have you ever considered getting into more of a GA flying scene or anything like that?
You know, a few years back when we had that total eclipse, the solar eclipse, I don't know how many years ago it was now. Was that 5 years ago? Anyway, Pip, who does the plane safety podcast, he's big into astronomy. He wanted to see the solar eclipse and wanted his family, his kids, to see it as well. And so he lives in England, and he planned to come over to the U.S. for a big vacation, go down to Disney World and do all that kind of stuff. And then he wanted to be back up in the Atlanta area because one of the lines of total eclipse was just over, not too far from the Atlanta area over in South Carolina. And so they found Mike Carroll's and Steph and Pip and some others got together, and they found a lake house on this lake in South Carolina. And so we were out there floating. Steph and I were out in the middle of the lake trying to get as close as we could to the actual real dotted line. Never saw the dotted line, but we thought we were pretty close to where the total eclipse was going to be. And I hear this airplane. I turn around. I think it was like a Carbon Cub or a Legacy Cub. You know, one of the new versions of the Cub. The companies. I forgot what you call those. They're light sport airplanes. And this thing came in and had floats on it. And I'm thinking, dang, would that not be cool to have like either a real J3 Cub on floats or one of these things. Yeah. And so I actually was, actively looking into how much it was going to cost to buy one of these things brand new and everything else. And I thought, after a while, I got out of my system. I'm thinking, I started thinking about all the other things involved with owning an airplane and doing that sort of thing. And it can get pretty expensive. And I only have a limited amount of money especially after my divorce. Like I have half as much as I used to think I had for retirement. And so the idea of, buying an airplane and that doesn't mean I can't get into GA. I know. But I think I'm going to be so busy traveling the country in the motorhome and doing the show that I'll only have time for my lovely listeners, if you're out there listening to me right now, volunteering their flying skills and perhaps their airplanes or whatever, taking me out for a ride or whatever to kind of, just keep going with that.
Well, if you find yourself at air shows, recording podcasts from air shows in your fantastic RV, let me know, because I'd love to.
Oh, see, I do plan on doing that for sure. Yeah. In April, I'll be probably somewhere in Florida, down near Lakeland area in Sun and Fun, and I'm sure in the last part of July, you could probably find me up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and so I am planning on doing the air show circuit. Basically,
that solar eclipse you were talking about, August 21st, 2017. The only reason I know is because I was over Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay.
And I had a camera phone at the time. I don't know what kind of phone it was or what iteration, but I had the little glasses, and I put the glasses over the lens of the camera, and I took that photo I just showed you guys.
Sweet.
Very, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I think there's a big solar eclipse coming in 2025, I think I just read. So,
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Now, last two questions before we talk a little bit about the Make-A-Wish kids. And again, thank you so much. Are you still okay on time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So if you can go back in time, just for a moment, and whisper in your own ear, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, wow. Wake up. Wow, that's a very profound question that I think I'd have to think a little bit about to give you really a good answer. But I would probably say, don't ever look back and regret the things that you've done with your life. learn from it, and always assume that the people that you encounter and who you live with, even they're probably good people. Deep down inside. I mean, I always just assume that everybody that I meet is a good person, even the people out there that you hear about that are not. And I think it's just because they just haven't gotten enough love. I think that love is such an important thing in our world, and I think that just always look for the good in every person that you encounter and you're with. And I guess it just goes to the golden rule. So I guess maybe I would just whisper, golden rule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that very well said. Couldn't agree more. I often have these conversations out on the flight line, and gentlemen, let me know if chime in if you've had these conversations as well. Is that I think that because of the world we live in today, a post-pandemic society with technology being what it is, we don't have these, commercials and what do they call them? Public service announcements, PSAs. Mm-hmm. We don't have this stuff, and we don't see these like billboards in the classroom anymore that says, golden rule, do unto others, respect your elders, be kind. Mm-hmm. Sticks and stones may break my bones. That's what I wish everybody believed that. Oh, yeah. Words will never hurt me. That's out. Don't get offended. I only get offended.
That offends me. That what you just said offended me.
No, well, I only get offended by people that get offended. So, sir.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We're not offended until you're offended.
That's right.
Exactly.
And so because we don't have, we get our media from our little matrix devices, right, that we're plugged into, and so we don't have that anymore. And now we're being bombarded by streaming media and entertainment, which podcasting is. But, I think that's missing. And with the what do they call it? The atomic family now, that everybody's working and everyone's plugged in, and people don't even have dinner anymore at the same table. They're all just on the go. And I think that's missing. So whenever I hear this, any kind of aspect that talks about kindness, I applaud it and I shout it out. I'm a very big fan of Fred Rogers. I think Fred Rogers, aka Mr. Rogers, I grew up and I learned English from Fred Rogers because I came to this country when I was a very young kid, and my mom would plop me down in front of the PBS station so that I could watch, Sesame Street and Fred Rogers and Reading Rainbow and Romper Room and all these shows from the 70s that really taught me a little bit about English and how to go to school and be able to be an ESL kid for a couple of years until I got it down. And that kindness, that calm that came from Mr. Rogers really did affect my outlook in life. And I think now that I'm podcasting, and the funny thing is I was listening to your shows, listening to a lot of aviation shows, and I didn't want to do what somebody else has already done. So I started writing in my journal and what I wanted to do. And on the very first page, I wrote down, the podcast must be in the voice of Fred Rogers. And so it's so far, knock on wood, it's been a pretty good ride. And I can see from your response that you're in a similar mindset. People are good, be kind. And, there's that thing that we have heard since 9/11, see something, say something. And I've kind of tweaked it over the years. And I try to shout it out as well to as many as possible. See something, do something.
Yeah.
Don't sit there and videotape somebody falling on the ground. Drop what you're doing. Help the person up. That person is somebody's grandmother or grandfather or brother, sister, something. And that's the nice thing about this podcasting community, is that I can reach out to you, you can reach out to me, and we can reach out to all the other podcasts out there. And most of the time we're like, yeah, for sure. Congratulations. Kudos, just a little bit of words of encouragement can go a long, long way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nice.
For sure.
Well, last question for you before we move on.
Yeah.
Who is the one person that you would like to thank that has had the biggest impact on your aviation career?
Wow. Again, you could have given these questions to me before.
Then it wouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah, no kidding. Biggest influence. I'd say when I was growing up in Los Alamitos, California, some friends of my parents, actually two people, two families that lived in our neighborhood. Well, actually, one of them lived in our neighborhood, and I think the other lived in a close by neighborhood, but it doesn't matter. One was a former military pilot. And I don't remember a lot about his career, but the one that I do remember was a man who was a United Airlines. Was he United or Western? Maybe he was a Western Airlines pilot. Anyway, he was an airline pilot, and he was making a home-built airplane in his garage, which converted into a workshop. And I just loved this guy, and he was, as I said, good friends with my parents, and he just seemed like a super. I was a kid. When we moved away, I was a preteen or just a teenager, barely. So I didn't. What I did know is that he was a man of character, and he was a man of passion, and I knew that he loved what he did for a living, so much so that he couldn't get enough of flying and was building his own airplane, his own home-built airplane. And I expressed an interest to him that I, was really taken with flying and that I wanted to be a pilot someday. And he gave me a book, and sadly, I don't have it with me because I'm in a transition now in my life. And all of my books are in boxes in my storage unit. But he handed me a book and gave it to me, and I think it was called, the title was Here's How to Fly. Pretty sure that was the name of it. And it had all the pictures of, the flight controls and basic aerodynamics and everything else. And I just I ate that up. I loved it. Wow. And I cherished that book. I still have it. And as I said, in a box somewhere in the storage unit. But anyway, I guess there's so many people who have had such an influence on my aviation career, but I guess it starts from the beginning when I was a kid growing up in Southern California, and his name was Bob Carroll, I'm pretty sure, because I think his wife's name was Carol, so she was Carol.
Oh, that's cool.
That's why I remember his last name.
Yeah,
nice. Anyway, so I guess that's my answer on short notice.
Nice.
Yeah. No, sorry about the short notice.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not.
No, you're not. I know
Worked
you're
out
not.
great. That's a good story.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about planes?
Clarence. Roger. What's our vector, Victor?
Oh, I know. It's like it's in those cracks.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, listener out there, for joining us as well. We really take pride about sharing the story of today's aviator, their journeys, how they got to where they were, especially when you have someone so important, so well spoken, that has a successful podcast of their own that talks about aviation, that tells people out there what to expect, dissects incidents and accidents that happen in the U.S. and around the world, and tries to explain what's really going on. 9 out of 10, the reporting is inaccurate. I love how you point that out. But now and again, we get to be a part of, or we get to read about some really cool and positive events that happen with your airline or with our airline. And I got a phone call a few months ago from a friend of our show, Captain Kevin Elmore. Now, Kevin has been on the show, I think, 4 times now. He's given us his journey. He's told us about leadership. He is a contributor to all kinds of organizations out there. He is a USA triathlete and coach. And he most recently came on the show and told us how his battle with gastric lymphoma cancer took away his his ability to fly, because he lost his medical. Thankfully, when he came on the show, he got his medical back and he was back out flying on the line. Recently, some medical issues have come up again, so he's going through some more treatment. I'll let him kind of get into that detail the next time he's on the show. But he had called me before all that happened, and he said, "Hey, you want to fly with me on a Make-A-Wish flight?" And I was like, "Kevin, you don't even have to ask. Just, what do I need to do?" And he goes, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it. I'll put your name down. It's going to be sometime in April, and we're going to go fly from JFK to Orlando, a bunch of Make-A-Wish kids and their families." And I said, "Oh, I'd be honored." And it just kind of blew me away. I was so excited about this. I started doing a little bit of reading about what's involved in these kind of flights. And sure enough, then Kevin got the diagnosis that he needed a little bit more treatment. So he was out. But he found a replacement. And I got to meet and fly with Captain Leroy. Fantastic guy. He was in the chief pilot's office for a while. He's come up through the military ranks as well. Came over to Legacy Airlines, and he's been a captain now on the airplane for quite some time. Very, very level-headed person. Very easy to get along with. Very professional. And so we went back and forth texting, going, "Hey, you're going to be my captain. I'm going to be your first officer," that kind of thing. And then as the days got nearer, I started to get kind of excited, and we ended up deadheading together from Los Angeles to JFK the day before. Now, all the other organizers that were in charge of this event for Legacy Airlines started a kind of a group email chain, and we're talking about, "Hey, let's meet up. Let's go to dinner the night before." And it was going to work out where we were going to join them. Unfortunately, our flight out of Los Angeles was delayed. Now, it wasn't a very lengthy delay, but it was a delay that lasted about an hour because the airplane was still in the hangar getting maintenance, and we were just deadheading out on an Airbus T model, a Transcon model. It's a 321T. Now, the 321T is unique that it doesn't have a 2-class configuration. It has a 3-class configuration. So it has the true first-class lay-down flat suites. Then it has the business class, which is what most people think of as first class. And then it has doesn't even have coach. It has like the economy extra, whatever it's called.
Yeah,
so,
it's like economy plus or whatever.
Yeah, it's a little bit more leg room. So I was very fortunate, as was my captain, that we both got first class seats. So we were able to have the lay down flat seat. We got dinner served, and it's actually decent food. It's not like the food they serve normally in coach or in the cabin. So, we had a great experience. I watched a couple of movies. There's a nice big monitor. They give you a little goodie bag when you're in first class, and it's got like, polyester, like slipper type socks and the eye mask and earplugs and things, and a little toothbrush kit and a little toiletry kit. And so mid-flight you can get up after the meal and go brush your teeth in the lab. And so I felt fancy. I felt really, really fancy. And the flight crew knew that we were deadheading out there for this particular event. So everybody was like really kind to us and saying, "Oh, I did one of those years ago. It was such a great thing, and you're going to really enjoy it." So I really felt special to be a part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation's flight. When we arrived in JFK, it was a little too late for us to join the others, so we ended up just going to the hotel and talking about what we can expect for the next day. We got to the airport at JFK about 2 hours ahead of the scheduled charter flight. It's actually a charter flight that the company donates this aircraft to the foundation to get these 27 families over to Orlando. And to say that it was a party would be an understatement. We got to the gate. It was completely decorated. They had a red carpet. They had rainbow arches of balloons, all Disney sponsored. And it was also sponsored by Brian Kelly, aka the Points Guy. So I got to meet this 6'7" of a man who's the Points Guy. Very intimidating. I got a really cool picture with him, my captain and I. He was very, very supportive, and we got to talking for a little bit. He even asked about the podcast and did a repost of the podcast on his Instagram, social media thing. Yes. Yeah, I said it. And also Give Kids the World Village was a part of this, which was actually not in the original press release, but I'll talk a little bit about that here coming up. Now, it all came together. They had breakfast at the gate, waffles and face painting, and they had some really cool like photo booths set up with 3D photos, and they were introducing like the families, and they'd walk down the red carpet, and the media was there, and passengers that were just at JFK to catch a morning flight were walking by going, what is going on? It's this loud music, and people were like stopping, and of course they were filming, a couple tears out there because of what a cool organization this is. Now, for those of you that don't know what Make-A-Wish is, we'll talk a little bit about it, but it's a nonprofit organization that puts together wishes for terminally ill children. And most of the time, they want to go to Disneyland. Recently, John Cena participated in a Make-A-Wish event that happened just this week where kids that want to be wrestlers. So guess what? They get to go into the ring with professional wrestlers, and they get to live out their dreams of becoming wrestlers. And these are kids that, again, have a terminal illness. Now, Wednesday, April 12th was the day of the event. I participated in flying the 27 Wish families that they called this flight the best flight ever. That was the title of the flight. It was a one-of-a-kind chartered airplane that departed New York's JFK Airport to land at Orlando's International Airport. Its purpose was to fulfill the wishes of the Wish kids to go to Disney World resorts and any other resort that they wanted to while they were there on their week-long excursion. I got to meet travel guru, as I mentioned, Brian Kelly, widely known as the Points guy. He was the onboard MC for the flight. They had a PA system, not the aircraft PA system, but another battery-operated PA system with microphones. And he was sitting there. They were doing games and stuff all throughout the flight. Now, I knew what was happening, but I couldn't hear a darn thing from the flight deck. We both had our noise-canceling David Clarks on, and we were just like, what's going on back there? Every once in a while, we would hear clapping and cheering, but for the most part, we didn't hear any music or anything. But they were playing games, and they even had Red Robin cater the meals. So there were cheeseburgers and gluten-free menus and vegan menus and this kind of stuff for the kids and their families. And they had live music from Michael James Scott. And if you don't know who that is, he is currently starring as the genie in Aladdin on Broadway. He was having a sing-along with the kids doing all kinds of Disney music. We got a water cannon salute, both leaving JFK and after landing at Orlando. The JFK control tower said, hey, what's going on? Is this a retirement flight? And since we were taxiing on the ground, the first officer is the one making PAs and making the radio calls. And I said, no, we're actually a Make-A-Wish flight today. We're heading to Orlando and bringing some very special kids to Disney World. And they were like, well, tell them the JFK controllers all say congratulations, have a great time. And so, of course, okay, made a pre-departure PA and relayed that message. And I don't know if they heard anything back there with our PAs that we were making, because the music and there was confetti and there was streamers hanging from the overhead bins, and it was just a big, big party. Now, what I will tell you this is that it didn't go smoothly. Now, we haven't had one of these events happen since pre-2019. This was the first flight that we were going to have done that went from JFK to Orlando. And all these organizations came together. I've been saying Legacy Airlines for a reason. It is an alias to my employer. I can divulge what happened because it's in a report. But what happened was, we're midway through the flight. The day was beautiful. It wasn't perfectly smooth, but for the most part, the seatbelt sign was off. And about an hour, maybe 45 minutes left to go on the flight, we get the dreaded ding dong. Our number one flight attendant says, guys, we may have a medical emergency on board. My heart sank into my stomach. We have 27 terminally ill kids. We're doing this media blitz of a flight. We've all volunteered to be here. And you're telling me we have a medical emergency? What? So the captain said, Tony, your airplane, your radios. I said, roger that. My airplane, my radios. And I hit the button on the audio control panels, and I brought the volume really low so I could actually hear what was going on. Since we weren't actually doing anything, we're just straight and level anyway. And she says, yeah, one of these children's is on a ventilator. It's a battery operated ventilator. And the seat that they're plugged into, the power port is not powerful enough to charge it. And the parents are telling us they only have 30 minutes left and we can't breathe without it. And we thought, oh my God, this is okay. So what do we do? So she's like, well, there's a nurse back there that's traveling with another family. And she's currently seeing about, are we going to have to manually have this child breathe through a manual bag, or what or do we have to do here? And the number one flight attendant, I sent a kudos report for her. She goes, you know what? I'm gonna suggest that they move to the last row of the aircraft and plug the ventilator into the power port that is in the galley. That is a maintenance power port that's powerful enough to power tools and vacuum cleaners and things like that. And the captain's like, that's an excellent idea. Please, as soon as let us know, because time is critical. And, if we've got to divert, we got to divert now. And she says, okay. So meanwhile, he's talking to dispatch and he's telling me, hey, Tony, what's our closest airport? What are we looking at? Can we go to Charlotte? Where can we go? And so at that point, I think Savannah was one, and Tampa, which was our alternate anyway, was another. And both of them were about 30 minutes away, which again was a time critical event for us because they told us they only had 30 minutes left on this portable ventilator for this child. And we were told that the parents were pretty calm throughout the whole thing, and they didn't want to alarm the other passengers. So they quietly took them to the rear row. They plugged in the ventilator, and thank God it worked. The battery was charging, the ventilator operated fine, and we continued the flight. But before that happened, in the process where my captain was asking me, Tony, what's the closest airport? Let me let the dispatcher know what's going on. And he was having issues connecting with his crew call on his tablet. It kept dropping the call. And he's like, this is too much to type. I need to get a hold of him. I'm like, yeah, I got the airplane. You get that. He stayed calm throughout the whole thing. And his calm gave me calm. We've heard this many times in interviewing pilots here on the podcast. Sometimes the other pilot's calm will give you calm, and it'll really work out. Sometimes it's the opposite way. The other pilot's freaking out, and you're freaking out because they're freaking out, and you're like, what? So it all worked out really nice. But before she gave us the information that it was working, the captain goes, you know what? I'm not going to wait. We're diverting. Tell them, declare an emergency. Tell them we're going to Tampa. It's right there, 27 minutes away. We can go direct. So I'm like, yes, sir. So we're going to Tampa, and I declared a pan, told them what was going on, told them we had this is a Make-A-Wish flight. We have children on board with their families, and one of the child's ventilators wasn't working. And air traffic said, all right, clear direct. Let me know what you need. Okay. So we changed destination. We went direct. And within 60 seconds, we get the call back going, oh, hey, we plugged in the ventilator in the rear galley. It all worked out. We can continue. The family's like, okay to continue. And the ventilator's charging now. So it's charging the battery. So the captain goes, okay, Tony, let them know. I'm still trying to get a hold of dispatch because they're probably wondering why we're making a turn suddenly. And so we went back on course. We reprogrammed the FMS system. We had to re-go through a bunch of checklists to make sure we didn't forget anything, rebrief everything. And he took over the airplane, and we landed without incident. To a water cannon salute, and we got everybody to the gate, and everybody's deplaning. Of course, it was a very slow process. As you can imagine, there were a lot of aisle chairs and equipment that had to be taken off. And then I asked operations, so when is this airplane going back out? And they're like, oh, it goes to Dallas in an hour. So here we are in Orlando, and I look at the captain. The captain goes, are we supposed to be cleaning up? I'm like, I don't know, but we're all supposed to go to all of the crew. We're all supposed to go to the hotel together. I'm going to help them. So he's like, okay. So we cleaned up everything in the cockpit, and then we went to the back and we pulled hundreds of streamers and confetti and just all the party stuff and just threw it in bags. And that way the cleaners were not overwhelmed. And they were in a pretty good rush to get us off the flight, but we cleaned it up. And when we walked into the terminal, there was probably about 50 to 60 volunteers, airport employees, organizers, all there with signs cheering, "Here comes the flight crew, yay!" And we're sitting there both honored and exhausted because of the anxiety that was brought up on this flight that's supposed to be the best flight ever. Seamless, good weather, there's no reason, no mechanical issues, but this emergency that was thankfully downgraded to be okay really did weigh heavy on all of us. And afterwards, we didn't have much time. We went to check into the hotel, and then the organizers for both Legacy Airlines and Make-A-Wish said, "Hey, we'd like to invite you to go to the village where these families stay. And while they're here during their week-long vacation." And we're like, "Sure." And they're like, "We're going to feed you and we'll take care of you. Just Uber over. We'll give you some Uber codes." So we did. The crew members that stayed behind and went to the hotel, we all jumped in an Uber and went over there. And that's where we learned about the Village. That is a nonprofit organization that was put together. The story is amazing. This is a guy who had a job here. I spoke with his wife. He's now since deceased, but this is a guy who was in multiple concentration camps during World War II, who came to this country. He and his sister survived. His parents did not survive. And he came to this country with barely anything, with a sponsorship, and that's it. And he ended up going to school, getting jobs, and he was working in a hotel near Cape Canaveral. And he would have these astronauts and pilots and all these bigwigs come in. And he one day was working the desk, and the original founder of Holiday Inn Hotels was staying there on a conference. And he asked him, he was working the desk, and he said, "Hey, where can I go and buy a tie? I need a tie. I have a meeting here in an hour, and I'm kind of tight for time." And he said, "Well, sir, take mine." So he takes his tie off and he hands it to his hotel guest. And he says, "Go have your meeting." And this man was so impressed with this kind gesture that when he came back from his meeting, he says, "Listen, I'm going to come back here in 6 months. And if you work on your English, you get your English a little bit better, and work on maybe getting some classes finished for business and stuff, I'd like to have you manage one of our hotels." He came back in 6 months. His English wasn't any better. He was still working the front desk, but he made him a manager of a hotel. Well, they were putting together these Make-A-Wish things, 20 years ago, 24 years ago. And they were trying to reserve rooms. And it took so long to get the ball rolling on the very first Make-A-Wish that the actual child passed away before they could make the wish happen. So he went out and he got all the other hotels in the Orlando area to contribute 10 rooms a year, just with an open contract. Give me 10 rooms a year, so that when these kind of things happen last second, we know that, okay, this hotel has rooms for us this week and that hotel has rooms for us that week. And that is how this village came to be. And now it has, I believe she said, 164 villas for their families to come. And while they're at the theme parks, they're filling the rooms up with toys and donations from organizations. And these kids, and not just the kids, but the siblings, the parents, they're all taken care of. Now, the Make-A-Wish has been built and shaped by volunteers, fundraisers, donors, and advocates who come together in support of the mission. All the children's wishes are to visit Walt Disney World Resort, and together with Make-A-Wish, they have helped grant more than 145,000 life-changing wishes like these since 1980. Make-A-Wish creates life-changing wishes for children in critical illness. Make-A-Wish is the #1 most trusted nonprofit or operating locally in all 50 states throughout the U.S. Together with generous donors, supporters, staff, and more than 24,000 volunteers across the country, Make-A-Wish delivers hope and joy to children and their families when they need it most. Make-A-Wish aims to bring the power of wishing to every child with a critical illness, because wish experience can help improve emotional and physical health. Since 1980, Make-A-Wish has granted more than 550,000 wishes worldwide, more than 360,000 wishes in the US and its territories alone. And I'll put a link in the show notes for more information about the Make-A-Wish Foundation. You can visit them at wish.org. Now, we talked about this village. The village is called Give Kids the World Village. I'll, again, put a link in the show notes. They are completely made up of volunteers. They have hundreds on their staff. We got there. They had all the characters come and visit. Every night there's a party. The food, everything's taken care of. They had an ice cream sundae store. The place looked like Disneyland. It was amazing. And yes, Steve from Blue's Clues was there signing autographs. Now, he's a little older now, but for those of you that used to watch Blue's Clues, Steve was there. Yeah, one of my flight attendants completely lost her mind. She's like, oh my God. Yeah, she took a picture with Steve. So that's what I participated in. We got back to the hotel, and afterwards, it was kind of an emotional day. So we all got together, went across the street. There was a really nice brewery in Orlando by our hotel, and we all shared a pint of something good. And it was nice. We made friends with our coworkers that we've never met before that will last a lifetime. And I highly encourage any of you out there that are currently flying for an airline. It doesn't take much to volunteer. Maybe a weekend of your life. Find out from your chief pilot or your organization to see if there's something that is coming up that you can volunteer for. I guarantee you that you'll get more out of it than you put into it. Is that too long?
Awesome story.
Excellent experience.
No. Wow.
Amazing.
I mean, it would be hard for me to do that kind of a trip because I would like be a blubbering idiot probably.
Oh, yeah.
Just seeing all the kids.
A lot of Kleenex.
Yeah.
Yeah, I fought back a few. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Wow. Good on you, man. That was a great experience. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, thank you.
Amazing.
Now, have any of you guys ever participated in anything? Make-A-Wish, or have you done like the what do you call it? The college
honor flights or anything like that?
I've done the honor flight. Have you?
Yeah.
Rob?
I haven't done anything like that.
No.
Is the honor flight where like you're taking the guys that fought in the wars and they're still alive to like Washington D.C. or?
There's a few. There's there's that flight,
Mm-hmm.
the honor flight where you're taking the old timers and the veterans, and then there's the when you have a fallen soldier on board and they're accompanied by
I've had a few of those.
And the flag and everything, and they bring the flag and the flight deck.
I've had that, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and I always try to, when I find out about these things, I try to do as much research as I can, about the fallen soldier and, make a PA and, kind of more than your normal PA, of course, to honor them. And it's always, encouraging to me when the one that comes to mind most was we took it up from the last leg of the journey. I forgot where the whole journey started, but from Atlanta to O'Hare again. And all the ARFF, the fire trucks and police cars and everything else when we were pulling out of the ramp, I thought, is the ramp closed? Because it looked like there was some kind of a major accident that had occurred that, where our part of where we park. Like, oh crap. Get on the company frequency, see what they want us to do. And then finally we realized, oh, wait a minute. No, there's not a problem here. They're all waiting for us to show up. And then, just everybody on the airplane, make the PA, would everybody please remain seated and allow the escorts to get off the airplane. And not a one person left the airplane during the entire time when they were getting the casket out. And it was just thinking, man, that just goes to show you, like what I was talking about earlier. I think there's good in all of us. And that was just proven to me on that flight.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so great when you get to either witness it or be a part of it. It's and like I said, you get way more out of it than you can ever imagine. So I encourage you out there to do something. It'll definitely warm your heart. Well, gentlemen, I think it's about 3 hours now. It's like it's like in the middle of an APG. You know, what's going on here?
I know, that's what happens when you have me on.
I love it. And you're welcome anytime, sir. Anytime. Well, for those of those maybe one or two people that have been living in a cave somewhere and they haven't heard of the Airline Pilot Guy Show, where can they find you?
Well, on anywhere you can find all fine aviation podcasts. But probably the best thing to do is just go to the website, airlinepilotguy.com. And all the information is there where you can listen to us. You can even listen to it right through that site, how you can subscribe via iTunes or whatever your favorite podcast catcher is.
Yeah.
And we get together and we use a audio video platform, and we just leave the video that's automatically made on YouTube and leave it up there. So if you want to see how the sausage is made, that's available too. It's Airline Pilot Guy on YouTube.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And I like that you have what's important about the website, and the same goes for the Squawk Ident website. When you're listening on a podcast player like Apple Podcasts and some of these other, maybe older podcast players, they don't put up and post the album art. They just have your icon, your show logo. And you're missing out because there's a lot of work that goes into this album art. I know APG has done a fantastic job with this album art. I'm looking at it. Thank you to Captain Nick. These are fantastic. And I don't get to see them normally because my default podcast player when I'm listening to other podcasts is Apple Podcasts. So I have to remind myself, let me go to the website and take a look under episodes what these album cover arts are. Now, the one thing you do, which is phenomenal, and maybe after the show or another time, we're going to talk about how you do these podcast chapters, because Apple Podcast usually is not a thing. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. And when I'm driving, it's great to see, especially during the plane tales, that you can see the images that are scrolling with the dialogue, and it's absolutely fantastic. So go to the airlinepilotguy.com. They're on all the social medias. I said it. Too bad. They're out there.
You know where I got that, Twitter. Though. Yeah, you know where. Yeah,
you were just talking about this in a previous episode. Highly, highly encourage you to go check it out if you haven't. Most probably you have, because that's hard to believe. Anybody wouldn't hear you. Your guys are like, what? I want to say number one.
I don't know.
I don't know. Your guys are up there.
We're up there.
It doesn't matter because it's about the love of the journey.
That's exactly
right. Well, let me just say a very special thank you to you, Captain Jeff, for joining us today. I am honored. We're all honored to have you on. I am looking forward to possibly actually seeing you. I have an Atlanta layover this week. We'll have to kind of see if maybe, sir, I can buy you a beer.
Oh, well, that would be, and I'll buy you a beer as well.
Yeah, we'll just go back and forth. It's great. I like it. It's a good plan. I also want to say thank you to Captain Rob and Terry for joining me today. Did you enjoy listening to the flight? Then play it forward by sharing this podcast online or with your friends and family. Make sure to subscribe and follow the Squawk Ident podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. We also love receiving listener feedback. You can send it to us via email or directly with audio feedback right on our website. That's at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram users can also find us under the Squawk Ident podcast. And one final thank you to all of you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there. Stay safe and take care of each other. Bye, y'all.
See ya.
Bye.
Meow.
All right.
Oh, you're the guy.
Meow. No, we're not the guy.
Oh, it's a beautiful night in this neighborhood. So many people have helped me to come to this night. Some of you are here. Some are far away. Some are even in heaven. All of us have special ones who have loved us into being. Would you just take, along with me, 10 seconds to think of the people who have helped you become who you are? those who have cared about you and wanted what was best for you in life. 10 seconds of silence. I'll watch the time. Whomever you've been thinking about, how pleased they must be to know the difference you feel they've made. You know, they're the kind of people television does well to offer our world. Special thanks to my family and friends, and to my co-workers in public broadcasting, family communications, and this academy for encouraging me, allowing me all these years to be your neighbor. May God be with you. Thank you very much.
fly this airplane and land it?
No, not a chance. No, not a chance. No, 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 no.